Story 1. If you don't sign off the house to my parents, the wedding's off, my fiance said. So I called off the wedding first and walked away with my property, and now she is panicking. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Hey everyone, I wasn't planning to post this, but what happened deserves its own thread. So, I've 34 male, been grinding in consulting for 10 years. Started with nothing, literally sleeping on my parents' couch, living on peanut butter sandwiches, and cold calling businesses from a thrift store suit. The first year I made $18,000. By year 3, I had my own apartment and a steady stream of clients. Now I run a solid 6-figure consulting business. No partners, no boss, no debt. With that stability, I started investing in real estate. Bought my first house 3 years ago, paid it off fast. Then got a fixer-upper on Maple Street, rented it out, and now pull in passive income while the value climbs. That's where I was when I met Nevada, 32 female, at a networking event. She stood out, smart, independent, had her own career in life. We hit it off fast. 6 months in, we were basically living together. After 2.5 years, I proposed. She was thrilled. We set the wedding for 8 months out, which seemed like plenty of time to do it properly without rushing. Looking back now, that's when the first cracks started showing. But at the time, I thought I'd found my person. Someone who got me, who appreciated what I'd built, who wanted to be a partner instead of a dependent. Man, was I wrong about that. The first red flag should have been when she wanted to open a joint account specifically for wedding expenses. Made sense on paper. Both contribute money, pay vendors from one account, keep everything organized. I figured it was smart financial planning, especially since Nevada worked in marketing and was good with details. I put in $25,000 to start, which was generous but not going to break me. Nevada added $8,000 from her savings. The plan was simple. Venue deposits, catering, photographer, flowers, all the standard wedding stuff would come out of this account. We'd each add more money as needed, but the initial $33,000 should cover most of the big expenses. Here's where it gets interesting. Nevada took the debit card and said she'd handle most of the vendor payments since she was doing the bulk of the planning legwork. Fair enough. I hate dealing with wedding vendors anyway. Rather focus on work and let her manage the details. First month, everything looked normal on the statements. $2,500 to the venue for the deposit, $800 to the photographer, $400 to the florist. Standard stuff that we'd already discussed and agreed on. I barely paid attention to the smaller charges because I trusted her judgment. But then I started noticing weird patterns when I reviewed the monthly statement. There was a $320 charge to some place called Bella's Boutique that I didn't recognize. When I asked Nevada about it, she said it was for shoes for the wedding. Okay, fine. Brides need special shoes apparently. Next was a $275 charge to a nail salon. I'm starting to think this chick has expensive taste, but I'm not going to be the guy who argues about wedding preparation costs. Most of my married friends told me to just write the checks and stay out of the planning details. Happy wife, happy life, and all that crap. The real wake-up call came when I saw a $1,200 charge to some fancy spa place. That seemed like a lot for whatever brides do at spas, so I asked about it over dinner. Oh, that's for my bachelorette party planning, Nevada said, cutting into her chicken like it was no big deal. Me and the girls are doing a weekend spa retreat instead of the typical Vegas thing. Much classier. I nearly choked on my food. You're paying for your entire bachelorette party out of our wedding account? It's wedding related, she said with this defensive tone. That logic made zero sense to me. The bachelorette party isn't a wedding expense. It's a personal party expense. The breaking point came when I saw multiple hotel charges totaling $2,400. All for the same weekend, our wedding weekend. When I added them up and asked about it, Nevada gave me this look like I was being petty. Those are for my family's hotel rooms, she said. My parents, my sisters, my Aunt Carol, and my cousin Lisa. They're all coming from out of state for the wedding. Nevada, we specifically talked about this. We agreed that families would handle their own travel and accommodation costs. That was before I really thought about it, she said. My family isn't as well off as yours. They shouldn't have to stress about hotel costs during our special weekend. Your parents can afford their own room. Yeah, my parents could afford it because they make smart financial decisions and live within their means. Nevada's parents couldn't afford it because they lease cars they can't pay for and take cruises on credit cards, but apparently pointing that out would make me the bad guy. We only have one wedding in this life, Nevada said when I pushed back. Why not do it right? Why not make sure everyone we love can be there without worrying about money? That phrase, we only have one wedding in this life, became her justification for everything. Upgraded flowers because we only have one wedding. Professional hair and makeup for all four bridesmaids because we only have one wedding. Meanwhile, Nevada hadn't added another penny to the joint account since that initial $8,000. She was spending money like we were millionaires while contributing nothing extra to cover the overages. I was basically funding her entire family's wedding vacation while she acted like it was our shared decision. The joint account balance kept dropping. $28,000, $25,000, $22,000. At this rate, we'd blow through everything before we even got to the big vendors like catering and the band. But every time I brought up the spending, Nevada would get emotional and say I was stressing her out during an already overwhelming time. I know I should have shut it down right then. Should have had a serious conversation about budgets and boundaries. But I kept telling myself it was just wedding stress, that things would go back to normal after we were married. I figured I could absorb the extra costs if it meant avoiding conflict during an already tense time. Biggest mistake I could have made, because what I thought was just wedding overspending was actually Nevada showing me exactly who she really was. And the real test was still coming. About 6 weeks before the wedding, Nevada and I are having one of our Sunday morning planning sessions. We developed this routine where we'd sit at my kitchen table with coffee and wedding binders, going through vendor confirmations and guest RSVPs. Pretty normal couple stuff, even if these sessions sometimes turned into arguments about her latest expensive ideas. This particular Sunday, everything seemed chill. We just finished updating the final headcount, 147 people, which was about 20 more than we originally planned because Nevada kept adding distant relatives and work friends. I was internally calculating what that would do to our catering costs when she brought up something completely out of left field. I've been thinking about wedding gifts, she said, not looking up from her phone where she was scrolling through some wedding planning app. Not the registry stuff from guests, but what we give to our families. I'm still focused on the guest list math, trying to figure out if we need to rent additional tables. What do you mean? Like thank you gifts for the parents? Sort of, but bigger than that. She set down her phone and got this look on her face like she was about to say something important. Your parents are pretty comfortable financially. They don't really need anything material from us. True enough, my parents are both retired teachers with decent pensions, own their house outright, take nice vacations every year. They're not wealthy, but they're secure and don't want for much. But my parents are in a different situation, Nevada continued. They've been stuck in that same rental apartment for like 15 years. Never been able to save enough for a down payment because rent keeps going up, and they had some credit issues a few years back. This was true too. Nevada's parents live in a decent two-bedroom apartment, but they're basically throwing away $1,400 a month in rent with nothing to show for it. Her dad works at an auto parts store, and her mom does part-time administrative work for a dentist. Nice people, but they make questionable financial choices. Always have car payments, take expensive vacations they can't afford, that kind of stuff. Okay, I said, still not seeing where this was heading. What are you thinking? Nevada leaned forward across the table, getting more animated. What if we gave them something that would actually change their lives? Something meaningful that shows how much we appreciate everything they've done for us? The way she was building up to this was making me nervous. Like what? The house on Maple Street. I literally stopped breathing for a second, just stared at her to see if she was joking. She wasn't. You want me to give your parents my rental property? Think about it logically, she said, like she was presenting a business proposal. You don't even live there. It's just sitting there generating rental income while my parents struggle with rising rent costs. This would solve their housing problem permanently. I put down my coffee cup and really looked at her. Nevada, that house is worth almost $300,000. You're asking me to give your parents a $300,000 wedding gift. She waved her hand dismissively. It's not like you'd be losing $300,000. You'd just be transferring an asset to family. The house would still exist. It would just belong to people who actually need it. The casual way she said it was almost insulting. Like I was being petty for thinking about the financial implications of giving away a house. I bought that property as an investment, I said, trying to stay calm. It generates $1,800 a month in rental income. That's over $20,000 a year. Why would I just give that away? Because we're about to be married, she said, her tone getting sharper. Because marriage means sometimes putting your spouse's family's needs before your own financial interests. Because it would mean everything to me. And what would you be giving my family in return? What's the equivalent gesture from your side? She looked at me like that was the dumbest question she'd ever heard. Your parents don't need anything. They're already comfortable. That's not the point. The point is, you're asking me to make a massive financial sacrifice while offering nothing comparable yourself. I'm offering my love and commitment, she said. I'm offering to build a life with you. Isn't that worth more than some rental income? The manipulation was so transparent it was almost insulting. She was trying to make this about our relationship when it was clearly about money and entitlement. Nevada, I'm not giving your parents my house. The shift in her face was immediate, like a switch flipped. The sweet, calm version of Nevada vanished, replaced by someone harder, colder. That entitled edge crept into her voice as she started talking about my second property like it was just sitting there waiting to be gifted. She didn't even try to sugarcoat it anymore. In her mind, owning two homes meant one was up for grabs, specifically for her parents. There was no recognition of how I'd gotten to this point, no appreciation for the years I'd spent grinding while she was still figuring out her major. Just the assumption that what I had built should now be redistributed to prove my loyalty. When I stood firm, her bitterness bubbled up fast. Suddenly, I was the villain. Selfish. Ungrateful. She acted like I was turning my back on the very people who had supposedly supported us, twisting the situation into some warped morality test. To her, declining to hand over a $300,000 property wasn't about boundaries. It was a personal insult. Then came the manipulation. She stopped pacing, fixed me with a look that was part disappointment, part threat, and said something that made my stomach turn. She threw love on the table like a bargaining chip, like if I didn't go along with this plan, it meant I didn't really love her. And in that moment, I realized exactly who I was engaged to. Someone who measured love by how much I was willing to sacrifice, not by mutual respect or trust. To her, giving away something I'd worked years for wasn't unreasonable. It was expected. Anything less meant I was failing her. The silence that followed was heavy. We just looked at each other across my kitchen table, and I could see her processing the fact that I wasn't going to cave to her demands. Fine, she said finally, grabbing her purse and keys. I'm going to stay with my parents until you set your mind straight about what marriage actually means. She headed for the door, then turned back with this dramatic pause. Call me when you're ready to be a real partner instead of a selfish landlord. The front door slammed behind her, and suddenly my house was quiet again. I sat there for a minute, trying to process what had just happened. My fiancé had just demanded I give her parents a $300,000 house as a wedding gift, then stormed out when I refused. The craziest part? She seemed genuinely shocked that I'd said no, like she'd expected me to just hand over my property without question, like it was a reasonable request instead of completely insane. That's when I started wondering what other expectations she had about my assets after we got married. And that's when I decided I needed to do some investigating. Nevada stayed at her parents' place for 2 days without calling or texting. Honestly, it was the most peaceful my house had felt in months. No wedding planning stress, no arguments about vendor costs, no dramatic sighs when I had to take work calls. Just me, my routine, and some actual quiet time to think. Tuesday morning around 9 a.m., my phone finally rings. Nevada's name pops up and I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. Have you thought about what we discussed? She asks, like she's calling to confirm dinner plans instead of asking about a $300,000 house. Her tone was different, though. Less angry than when she'd stormed out, more like she was talking to a client she was trying to close a deal with. Professional, but with this underlying assumption that I'd obviously come around to her way of thinking. Yeah, I've thought about it, I said. The answer's still no. There was this long pause, and I could practically hear the wheels turning in her head. She'd probably spent the last 2 days with her parents, getting them all excited about the possibility of free homeownership, maybe even planning where they'd put their furniture. Look, I said, trying to keep things civil. I understand you want to help your parents. After we're married, we can talk about ways to assist them financially. Maybe help with a down payment on their own place or… No, she cut me off. That's not what I'm asking for. I'm asking for this specific house, for this specific reason, as this specific gesture. Either you understand why this matters to me, or you don't. The way she said it made my stomach drop. This wasn't a negotiation anymore. This was an ultimatum disguised as a conversation. And if I don't? I asked. Another long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was ice cold. Then maybe we need to postpone the wedding until you're ready to be the partner I need you to be. There it was. The threat I'd been waiting for. Give me your house or lose your fiancé. Pretty clear choice, right? Let me think about it, I told her. This is a big decision. Give me a few days to process everything. Her tone immediately brightened, like a salesperson who just got a customer to agree to think about the extended warranty. Really? Oh, Ryan, I knew you'd understand once you really thought about it. This is going to be so amazing. My parents are going to be so grateful, and I'm going to be so proud to have a husband who cares about family the way you do." The confidence in her voice was telling. She wasn't hoping I'd agree. She was expecting it. Like the outcome was already decided, and I just needed time to accept the inevitable. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen for a while, trying to wrap my head around what had just happened. My fiance had just threatened to postpone our wedding unless I gave her parents my house. That's when I decided to make some phone calls of my own. First call was to my buddy Sebastian, who's been practicing law for about 8 years now. We went to college together, and he's always been straight with me about legal stuff. I explained the whole situation. Fiance demanding I gift her parents my rental property, threatening to postpone the wedding if I refuse. "Dude," he said immediately, "run. Like, pack your shit and run right now." "It's that bad?" "Ryan, this isn't normal behavior. This is gold digger level manipulation. She's literally holding your wedding hostage to extort property from you." We talked for about an hour about my options and what I needed to protect myself legally. Sebastian explained how marriage affects property ownership, what community property laws look like in our state, and how Nevada might try to claim rights to my assets after we were married. "Here's what you need to do right now," he said. "Document everything. Every conversation, every text message, every demand she makes. If this goes south, you'll need evidence that she was trying to manipulate you. You think I should start recording our phone calls?" "Absolutely. You're allowed to record conversations you're part of. It's not wiretapping if you're one of the participants." That afternoon, I called my financial advisor and my accountant, explained that I was having second thoughts about getting married, and wanted to make sure all my assets were properly protected. Both of them said the same thing Sebastian had: document everything and don't transfer any property before the wedding. My accountant was especially blunt about it. "Ryan, you've worked too hard building wealth to hand it over to someone who sees you as a bank account. This woman is showing you exactly who she is. Believe her." That evening, I started going through my phone, screenshotting all the text conversations Nevada and I had about wedding expenses and her family's financial situation. I also set up a separate bank account and started moving some of my personal savings there, just in case things got messy. The more I thought about it, the more obvious it became that Nevada had been planning this for a while. The timing wasn't random. She'd waited until we were close enough to the wedding that I'd feel pressure to avoid disrupting everything. She'd probably calculated that I'd rather give up the house than deal with the embarrassment and hassle of canceling a wedding. What she didn't realize was that I'd rather deal with some temporary embarrassment than spend the rest of my life married to someone who saw my assets as her family's retirement plan. Thursday morning, I started making some very quiet phone calls to wedding vendors. Didn't cancel anything yet, just asked about their cancellation policies and what kind of deposits I'd lose if we had to call things off. Wanted to know exactly what this decision was going to cost me financially. Turns out most vendors have pretty standard policies. You lose the deposit, but don't owe the full amount if you cancel more than 30 days out. Some places were more flexible than others, but overall it wouldn't be a financial disaster to pull the plug. That's when I realized I'd already made my decision. I was just waiting for Nevada to call back so I could see if she'd double down on her demands or maybe come to her senses. Friday morning, right on schedule, my phone rang. "Good morning, babe," she says, voice all sweet and optimistic. "How are you feeling about everything?" "Still thinking," I told her. "This is a huge decision, Nevada. I want to make sure I'm considering all the angles." "Of course, I totally understand. Take all the time you need." "Well, I mean, we do need to figure this out soon since the wedding's coming up, but I know you'll make the right choice." The confidence in her voice was unreal. Like she'd already mentally moved her parents into my house and was just waiting for me to catch up to her timeline. "Actually, I was wondering about something," I said. "Have you mentioned this idea to your parents yet?" Slight pause. "We've talked about it, yes. I mean, I wanted to see how they felt about the whole thing before bringing it to you." "What did they say?" "They were incredibly touched, Ryan. My mom actually cried when I told her you were considering it. She said she's never met anyone as generous as you." That right there told me everything I needed to know. Nevada hadn't presented this as a possibility or an idea she was exploring. She'd told her parents it was happening, probably got them all excited and grateful, and now she was using their emotions as additional pressure on me. "That's nice," I said. "I'd hate to disappoint them if this doesn't work out." "It's going to work out," she said quickly. "I know you, Ryan. You're a good man who cares about family." After the call, I decided to do some investigating. Something about Nevada's confidence was bugging me. She seemed way too sure that I'd cave, like she had information I didn't know about. First thing I did was check the security system on the rental property. I've got cameras on the front and back doors, plus one overlooking the driveway. Mainly installed them to keep an eye on the tenants and make sure they're not trashing the place or having unauthorized parties. I pulled up the footage from the past week, just routine checking, and that's when I saw something that made my blood boil. Wednesday afternoon, the day after Nevada stormed out of my house, there's her car pulling into the driveway of my rental property. And she's not alone. Two older people get out with her, and I immediately recognize them as her parents. I watched the footage of the three of them walking around my property for almost an hour. Nevada had keys somehow, probably made copies when we'd done a walkthrough together months ago, so she could see the investment side of my portfolio. Her mom was taking pictures with her phone, while her dad was actually measuring rooms with a tape measure. They weren't just looking at the house, they were planning how to use it. At one point, Nevada's pointing to different rooms, and her parents are nodding along, clearly discussing furniture placement or room assignments. Her dad spent like 10 minutes in the garage, probably figuring out storage for his tools and lawn equipment. The whole thing lasted over an hour, and they were clearly treating it like a house they were about to move into, not a property they were hoping to maybe receive someday. But it gets worse. I called the property management company I use for tenant relations and maintenance issues. Asked Sarah, the office manager, if anyone had been asking questions about the Maple Street property lately. Actually, yes, she said. A young woman called last week, asking about getting an appraisal done. Said she was the owner's fiancé, and you'd asked her to handle it for insurance purposes. My stomach dropped. Did she give you a name? Nevada something. She seemed to know details about the property, so I didn't think anything of it. Was I not supposed to help her? Nevada had gotten my rental property appraised behind my back. She'd impersonated my authority to get financial information about an asset I owned without my knowledge or permission. Sarah, I never asked her to do that. Please don't provide any information about my properties to anyone without checking with me directly first. Oh God, I'm so sorry. Should I not have authorized the appraisal? It's fine. Just send me a copy of the report when you get it. The appraisal came back at $285,000, which was actually higher than I'd estimated. So now Nevada knew exactly what she was asking for. Not just a house, but specifically a $285,000 asset that was worth more than most people make in 5 years. That evening, I was still processing all this when my phone buzzed with a text from Nevada. Talked to my parents today. They're so excited about the possibility of finally having their own place. Mom's already planning her garden. She was using her parents' emotions as leverage, making it harder for me to say no without disappointing people who were probably already mentally packing their apartment. But then she sent another text that really showed her true colors. I mean, it's basically our house anyway once we're married, right? Community property and all that. This way my parents get to enjoy it while they're still young enough to really appreciate it. There it was. The real plan. Nevada thought that marrying me would give her legal claim to my assets. She was planning to use that house whether I agreed to gift it or not. The wedding gift angle was just her way of getting it transferred, before I realized what community property laws actually meant. Except she was wrong about the law. I'd checked with Sebastien. Property owned before marriage stays separate, unless it gets commingled or jointly titled. My rental house would remain mine even after we got married, as long as I didn't add her name to the deed. But Nevada didn't know that. She thought she was being clever, getting me to voluntarily hand over something she assumed would become hers anyway. That night, I made my decision. I started making calls, and by Sunday night, I'd quietly canceled about 80% of our wedding arrangements. The only people who knew were the vendors, and I'd asked them all to keep it confidential until I could speak with my fiancé directly. Monday morning, Nevada called for her weekly check-in. Her voice came through bright and chipper. So what's your decision? I've made up my mind, I said, cutting straight to it. The wedding's off. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could literally hear Nevada breathing, while her brain tried to process what I'd just said. What do you mean the wedding's off? She finally asked, voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. I'm not marrying you. We're done. I didn't expect silence after that. Nevada always had something to say. But what followed wasn't a real conversation. It was just her trying to reverse engineer a future I no longer wanted. She hit every phase of denial like a checklist. First, she said I was just stressed, that the house situation had gotten in my head. Then she offered to forget all of it. Her parents, the appraisal, the entitlement. Said we could start fresh, just the two of us. She didn't get that the damage wasn't just done. It was revealed. When that didn't work, she snapped. Full meltdown. Screamed about how ungrateful I was. How I'd never find anyone who loved me like she did. How this was all a big overreaction. I let her rant. Then, finally, I spoke. You don't love me, Nevada. You love what I could give you. And you got caught counting it early. I could almost hear her scrambling for ground to stand on. She tried to claim she'd just been excited, Said she wanted to show her parents how generous I was going to be, that it wasn't meant to be behind my back, but it was. She got my property appraised. She gave tours like she already owned it. She made calls pretending to be someone she wasn't, and she didn't expect me to have security cameras, or that the management company logs every inquiry. The fake crying started when she realized I wasn't budging. She apologized. Well, she used the word sorry, but only after being cornered, not because she meant it. I thought we were building something real, she said. 3 years down the drain just like that? No, I told her. 3 years showed me who you really are when you think you're above consequences. That was the last real thing I said before ending the call. Told her to come pick up whatever she had left at my place before the week was out. And after that, I didn't want to hear from her again. Then I hung up. And just like that, the future she'd designed without me collapsed. Not with a fight, not with a final plea, just with a click. Within an hour, my phone was blowing up with calls and texts from Nevada, her parents, her sister, even some of her friends. I ignored all of them and started phase 2 of my plan. Called my parents first, then my sister and my close friends. Explained exactly what had happened before Nevada could spin her version. Sent them screenshots of her texts about the house being basically ours anyway, and copies of the unauthorized appraisal request. My mom's reaction was perfect. Oh, honey, you dodged a bullet there. That girl was trouble from the start. You could tell? She had that look in her eyes whenever she talked about your business or your properties, like she was already spending money that wasn't hers. My sister was even more blunt. Thank God you figured this out before the wedding. Can you imagine dealing with her in a divorce? Next, I called Sebastin and had him draft a cease and desist letter. If Nevada was going to try to trash my reputation or spread lies about why the wedding got canceled, I wanted legal protection ready to go. The letter was basically a warning that I had documented evidence of her attempts to manipulate me into transferring property, plus recordings of our conversations about the house demands. If she tried to defame me or claim I'd been abusive or controlling, I'd release everything and let people judge for themselves. Sebastien also helped me change the locks on both my properties and update all my financial accounts to remove Nevada's access. She'd never been officially added to anything, but I wanted to make sure there were no loose ends she could exploit. Tuesday evening, I saw them on the security feed before they even rang the bell. Nevada and her sister Michelle, standing outside my front door like a guilt-tripping welcome wagon. Nevada looked wrecked. I let them stand there a minute before opening the door. She wasted no time. Asked for 5 minutes. Said she just wanted to talk. Her voice cracked at the end, like she'd rehearsed it, but couldn't hold the performance. I told her flat out. There wasn't anything left to talk about. Her actions already said everything. She tried to downplay it all. Said she got carried away. Blamed wedding stress. Said she pushed too hard. That it wasn't worth throwing away everything we'd built. Michelle chimed in, playing the sympathy card. Nevada hadn't stopped crying since the call. She loves you, Ryan. She's sorry. She really is. But remorse after exposure isn't the same as integrity. I reminded them both that being sorry doesn't undo what was done. It doesn't erase who someone shows themselves to be when they think they're untouchable. Nevada's voice cracked again. And this time, I think the tears were real. I was just trying to do something meaningful, she said, voice breaking mid-sentence. For my parents. For us. I thought if we started our marriage with something generous, something amazing, it would bring everyone closer. Right. With my property. My money. My name on the deeds. Her parents picking curtains like it was already theirs. She claimed she would have done the same for mine if the roles were reversed. I told her they weren't, and never would be, because she didn't have a 6-figure asset to dangle. That generosity had never been the point. Access was. Then, Michelle's tone shifted, sharp and defensive. Said maybe Nevada was better off, that a man who picks money over love wasn't worth marrying to begin with. I didn't say anything. I just stepped inside for a moment and came back with a cardboard box. Everything Nevada had left at my place over the years, and handed it over without a word. She took the box but didn't leave. Just stared at me like she was waiting for some sign I'd changed my mind. Instead, she dropped the last card in her deck. Bitterness. I hope you're happy, she muttered. Hope your precious houses keep you warm at night. They will, I said. Unlike a wife who treats me like a wallet with a heartbeat. She turned and walked off. Michelle trailed behind, glaring like I'd kicked a puppy. I closed the door, locked it, deleted her access from the smart lock. The next morning, I got a call from her parents. I shouldn't have answered, but part of me wanted to know what kind of spin they'd put on all this. Her dad started in immediately. No hello, just irritation. Said I was being ridiculous. That it was just a house I didn't even live in. Asked if I was really that selfish. I kept it calm. explained again that it was my house, bought with my money, and their daughter tried to hand it over without permission, then lied about it. Her mom piped up in the background, said it was all out of love, said they thought I actually cared about Nevada's happiness. I told them I did. That's why I wasn't marrying her. Because someone like Nevada, who needs to control and claim everything around her, wouldn't be happy with someone she couldn't manipulate. That didn't go over well. Her dad snapped, said I'd regret this, told me I'd never find anyone better. Maybe not, I said, but at least I won't have to worry about someone trying to steal what's mine. They hung up, no follow-up, no apology, just a silent confirmation that walking away was the smartest thing I've done in years. Over the next few weeks, Nevada tried a few more approaches. Mutual friends reaching out to mediate, a long email explaining her side of the story, even a LinkedIn message about how we could handle this professionally. I ignored all of it. Sebastian sent the cease and desist letter when she started posting vague stuff on social media about learning who people really are, and gold diggers come in all forms. The letter worked. She went quiet after that. 6 months later, I heard through a mutual friend that Nevada had moved back in with her parents, still living in that same rental apartment, still complaining about not being able to afford to buy a house. Meanwhile, my rental property is still generating $1,800 a month. My business is doing better than ever, and I don't have to worry about someone trying to manipulate me into giving away my life's work. Story 2. This story is titled, My Mom Threw Me Out to Focus on Her New Kids. Now I'm successful. She wants me to pay for siblings' college. Hi everyone, before we dive in, a quick favor. If you enjoy content like this, please hit the subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and makes sure you never miss out on amazing videos. Alright, let's get started. Hey guys, I've been sitting on this for a while, and I think it's time to finally put it out there. It's been eating at me, and honestly, I just need to get it off my chest. So, I'm going to start from the very beginning because context matters. I'm 33 now, working in upper management at a company I've been with since graduation. And while I've worked my ass off to get where I am, there's still a part of me that looks back and wonders what life could have been like if my mom had made better choices. She had me when she was 20. My biological dad wasn't in the picture. Honestly, I don't even know much about him. From what she told me later, she gave him the option to stick around, and he didn't hesitate to bolt. No child support, no fights, just gone. We lived in this tiny apartment above my grandparents' garage. It wasn't much, but it worked. My grandparents basically carried her through that time. They helped her with me while she finished school and got her degree in physical therapy. She juggled school, work, and raising me on her own. I'll give her credit. She didn't just sit around feeling sorry for herself being a single mom. She worked hard. Those early years weren't bad. Sure, money was tight, but I didn't notice. I spent a lot of time with my grandparents while she worked or studied. My grandpa loved having me around. Honestly, he probably did more for me than anyone else during those years. My mom would still make time for me when she could. She read to me before bed, took me to the park, stuff like that. Things changed when I was about 8. My mom met this guy named Leonard at her job. He seemed all right at first. Stable job, normal guy. I remember her saying how different he was from the guys she'd dated before. They dated for a while, and after a couple of years, they got married when I was around 11. Leonard wasn't a bad guy, but he wasn't warm either. He was polite, almost distant. He wasn't mean to me or anything, but he didn't really try to connect either. He treated me like I was just there, you know? Like part of the furniture. At first, nothing really changed. I was still living with my mom and now Leonard. It was fine, not great, but fine. Then, little things started to shift. My mom started focusing more on Leonard and their life together. Dinners became quieter, less about me and more about them. I remember sitting there, trying to join the conversation and being brushed aside like I wasn't even there. I didn't take it personally at first. I figured she was just excited about her new marriage and trying to make it work. But as time went on, it became clear that I was slowly being pushed out of the picture. I tried harder to get their attention. I worked my ass off in school, brought home good grades, helped around the house. Anything to show I was still worth noticing. Then, when I was about 12, my mom got pregnant. Twins. Everyone was thrilled. I was too, at least at first. I imagined being the cool older brother, helping out with the babies, teaching them things, and just being part of this new family. I even started babysitting for neighbors to practice for when the twins came. But as her pregnancy went on, my mom's attitude toward me shifted even more. It was like she didn't have time for me anymore. Everything was about the twins. I figured it was temporary, like once they were born, things would go back to normal. The twins came along, and it was like I vanished overnight. I mean, I get it. They're babies, and babies need constant care and attention. I wasn't expecting things to stay exactly the same, but this was on a whole different level. It wasn't just about her being busy or tired, which would have made sense. It felt like she stopped seeing me altogether. Family dinners? Those became a thing of the past. She used to be the one planning them, making an effort for us to have some time together, but now? Nothing. And it wasn't just about skipping dinners. The little things that used to make me feel connected to her disappeared too. Talking about our day, watching a show together, even sharing those random inside jokes we used to have. I think the worst part was how I kept trying. Even though it was clear I wasn't part of this new family dynamic, I still tried. I still worked hard in school, helped out, and tried to make myself useful. But no matter what I did, it didn't matter. I wasn't a priority anymore. By the time I was 16, everything came to a boiling point. My mom and Leonard called me into the living room one evening, saying they needed to have a serious conversation. I knew it wasn't going to be good. I could feel it in the air. They sat me down and started explaining how things were getting tight financially. With the twins, they said, their expenses had gone up, and they couldn't afford to support everyone in the house anymore. Leonard did most of the talking, laying out all the numbers like I was supposed to feel bad for them. My mom just sat there, looking at me, and then she said something I won't ever forget. They deserve more. Not, we'll figure it out. Not, we're in this together. Just a clear message that I was nothing to them. I didn't argue. What was the point? I went to my room, packed up what little I had, clothes, a few personal things, and walked out the door. I didn't even look back. I went straight to my grandparents' house. They didn't hesitate to take me in, but man, were they mad. My grandpa kept pacing, muttering under his breath about how he couldn't believe his daughter would do this, while my grandma just shook her head and hugged me tightly. They wanted to confront my mom, but at the same time, they didn't want to cut her off completely, mostly because of the twins. And I got it. The twins were innocent in all of this. They didn't ask to be born, and they certainly didn't ask to become the center of my mom's world at my expense. I couldn't blame them, even if I was angry at the situation. That day was a turning point for me. It was the day I realized I couldn't rely on my mom anymore. At 16, I wasn't just a teenager trying to figure out life. I was on my own. It was scary, yeah, but I didn't have a choice. From that moment on, I knew I had to take care of myself, because no one else was going to do it. Living with my grandparents was a relief, but it wasn't easy. They gave me a roof over my head and a place to stay, but they couldn't do much beyond that. They were retired, living on a fixed income, and just didn't have the resources to support me the way I needed. So I started working. My first job was at this local coffee shop. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid just enough for me to buy school supplies, clothes, and some of the stuff I needed to get through high school. Balancing work and school wasn't simple, though. I'd get home late, try to finish homework, and wake up early the next day to do it all over again. My grades slipped a bit, but I still managed to stay on track to graduate. What really stung was that my mom didn't check in. At all. It was like I'd ceased to exist for her. Every now and then, I'd hear about her and Leonard through family gossip. They were doing well, of course. The twins were thriving, and they were living their picture-perfect life in their nice house with their new cars. And honestly, I couldn't wrap my head around it. I don't know why two people working decent jobs couldn't afford having 3 kids. I wasn't some extravagant expense. I just needed the basics. Meanwhile, I was the one struggling. I was working weekends and late into school nights just to keep myself afloat. Juggling homework, shifts, and trying to have some semblance of a normal life was exhausting. It wasn't like I was asking for much from them. Just a little effort, a little care. But it felt like the second I walked out that door, they wiped their hands clean of me and went back to their perfect little bubble. I guess it wasn't really about the expenses. They just didn't want me anymore. Around my senior year, college acceptance letters started rolling in. I was excited but also terrified. I knew there was no way I could afford college on my own. I needed help. So, against my better judgment, I reached out to my mom. I remember sitting in my grandparents' kitchen late at night, holding my phone, trying to figure out how to word the text. My mind kept spinning with different ways to ask for help without sounding too desperate. I deleted and rewrote it at least 10 times before finally sending, "Hey, I've been accepted to a few colleges. I was wondering if you could help me with financial aid stuff or co-sign a loan." I hit send and immediately regretted it. Not because I thought it was wrong to ask, but because deep down, I already knew the answer. Still, a tiny, stupid part of me held on to hope. Maybe she'd remember I was her kid too. Her reply came hours later, and when it did, my stomach dropped. "We're saving for the twins' future. We can't help. Sorry." That was it. No congrats, no we're proud of you. Just a flat rejection. It shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. Or maybe it just hurt more than I wanted to admit. I stared at the message, trying to process how someone could shut their own kid down like that. It wasn't even about the money. It was the complete lack of care. I sat there feeling like an idiot, wondering why I'd even bothered. I knew I couldn't count on her. I put my phone down, trying to swallow the lump in my throat, but the tears came anyway. I wasn't mad at the twins. They didn't ask for this. But I couldn't help but feel like I'd been cast aside, like I didn't matter. Thankfully, my aunt stepped in. When I told her what happened, she didn't even hesitate. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "I'll co-sign your loans. You just focus on making this work, okay?" She didn't have to do that. She had her own responsibilities and kids to worry about, but she believed in me. She told me she always knew I had it in me to go far, and honestly, that belief hit me harder than the offer itself. At that moment, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't let her down. I'd work my ass off, not just for me, but to prove that her faith in me wasn't misplaced. My mom might have slammed the door shut, but my aunt? She flung it wide open, and I wasn't about to waste the chance. College was no joke. I hustled nonstop, campus jobs, weekend shifts, and side gigs just to keep myself afloat. I even taught myself web design and started freelancing for small businesses. The work paid well, and I had bills to cover. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford, but I didn't care. I had a goal, and nothing was going to stop me. And my mom? Still radio silence. Not a single text or call to check in. Every now and then, I'd stumble across her social media posts. Pictures of the twins at their school plays, their birthdays, or their family vacations to Disneyland. She looked so carefree, like her life was this perfect little bubble. Those posts felt like a dagger straight to my chest. So eventually, I blocked her. I couldn't keep torturing myself by looking at a life I wasn't part of. When graduation finally rolled around, I sent my aunt an invite to the ceremony. She didn't just come. She was beaming in the front row, cheering louder than anyone else when my name was called. My mom. I didn't even bother asking her. If she didn't care about my education when I needed her help the most, she didn't deserve to be there celebrating my success. My aunt, though, she deserved every bit of that moment, because without her, I might not have made it at all. After graduation, the real grind started. I moved to a small city for a job in my field. The pay wasn't great, but it was enough to cover my bills and start chipping away at my student loans. Those first few years were rough. I was living in a tiny apartment with crappy furniture and working long hours just to prove myself. I poured everything I had into that job. I took every opportunity to learn, stayed late to finish projects, and volunteered for tasks no one else wanted. Slowly but surely, it started paying off. I got a promotion, then another, and before I knew it, I was moving up the ladder. By the time I hit my late 20s, I was finally in a good place. I'd paid off a big chunk of my loans, upgraded to a decent apartment, and had some savings for the first time in my life. It felt like I was finally getting ahead. My relationship with my mom was still non-existent. I didn't go out of my way to contact her, and she didn't either. Every now and then, I'd hear from relatives that she asked about me, but it never led to anything. She had her family, and I had my life. I think the hardest part of those years was realizing that she wasn't going to change. Some part of me had always hoped she'd reach out, apologize, or at least acknowledge how she'd treated me, but it never happened. Instead, I learned to stop expecting anything from her. Fast forward at the age of 30, I was in upper management, making more money than I ever thought I would. I kept it quiet, though. I didn't post about it online, didn't tell most of my family. I didn't want to deal with the drama that would come with it. But my aunt, the one who co-signed my loans, was the only one who knew about my promotion. She was proud of me and told me so every time we talked. Unfortunately, at a family gathering, she casually mentioned it to my mom, thinking it might spark some kind of reconciliation. She meant well. She's always been the one trying to keep the peace. But that one comment set off a chain reaction I wasn't ready for. A few days later, there was a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I looked through the peephole. It was my mom and Leonard. I hadn't seen them in years, and I couldn't think of a single good reason for them to be standing on my doorstep. I opened the door, but I didn't step aside to let them in. "What's going on?" I asked. Leonard didn't bother with pleasantries. "We need to talk," he said, shoving his way past me like he owned the place. My mom followed him in without so much as a hello. "We heard about your promotion," Leonard started, his tone sharp and matter-of-fact. "So you're finally doing something with yourself. Good for you. About time, really." I stared at them. No congrats. No small talk after all these, just straight to insults. "Okay," I said slowly. "And?" Mom jumped in. "The twins are starting college soon, and we've hit a bit of a rough patch financially. We figured since you're doing so well now, you could help out with their expenses." I don't remember my reaction back then, but I know that all I did was try to process what's going on. After years of silence, after everything they'd put me through, they had the nerve to show up at my door and demand money? "Are you serious?" I finally said. "Why wouldn't we be?" Leonard shot back. "You're making good money now, aren't you? Don't act like you can't afford it. You don't have kids. You don't have a family to take care of. You've got the money. It's not about whether I can afford it, I said, my voice rising. It's about the fact that you two have done absolutely nothing for me, and now you're standing here asking for a handout like I owe you something. Mom rolled her eyes. Oh, here we go, she said, throwing her hands up. You're going to play the victim again. Poor you. We didn't coddle you enough. You've been holding on to this grudge for years. And for what? Look at you. You turned out fine. Yeah, because I worked my ass off, I snapped, with no help from either of you. Do you have any idea how hard it was to get through college without a cosigner, without any financial support? I made it happen, but not because of you. In spite of you. Leonard smirked. Oh, come on. Stop acting like you had it so rough. You've got a good job now, don't you? A nice place to live? Maybe you should be thanking us. If we hadn't pushed you out, you wouldn't be where you are today. Thanking you? I said, my voice shaking with anger. You threw me out because I wasn't convenient anymore. You made it clear I didn't matter to you, and now you're here expecting me to swoop in and save the day for the kids you actually cared about? Number absolutely not. Mom's tone turned icy. You're being selfish, she snapped. I raised you on my own, worked my ass off to keep you alive, to give you everything you needed. And now look at you. You've got everything you need, and all we're asking for is a little help. They're your siblings. You owe them that much after everything I've done for you. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. Like I should feel ashamed for not immediately bending over backward for her and the twins. I don't owe them anything, I shot back. And I definitely don't owe either of you. You made your choices, and I made mine. You decided I wasn't worth your time or money, and now you're expecting me to put my life on hold for them? That's not happening. Leonard stepped closer, his face hard. You know what your problem is? You've always thought you were more important than you actually are. You think you're better than everyone else just because you made it out on your own. But let me tell you something. You didn't mean anything to this family then, and you don't mean anything now. That hit so bad, but I didn't let it show. Then why are you here? I said coldly. If I don't mean anything to you, why are you standing in my living room begging for money? Mom snapped. Because we didn't want to come here. Do you think we enjoy asking you for help? But the twins deserve a future, and if you weren't so goddamn selfish, you'd see that. But no, you're too busy playing the wounded child to do anything for anyone but yourself. I laughed bitterly. You want to talk about being selfish? You threw your own kid out of the house to make room for your real family. You told me I wasn't worth the effort. And now you want to stand here and talk about what the twins deserve? They deserve better parents. That's not my problem. Leonard pointed a finger at me, his voice rising. You better watch your mouth. We're still your family, whether you like it or not. And family helps family. No, I said firmly. Family doesn't do what you did to me. Family doesn't throw their kid out like trash and then come crawling back when they need money. You're not my family. You're strangers to me. Mom's face twisted in anger. Fine. Be a selfish little brat. But don't come crying to us when your life falls apart. You think you're so much better than us, but you're nothing. You'll always be nothing. That was it. I'd had enough. If you don't leave right now, I said, pulling out my phone. I'm calling the police. Leonard scoffed. Go ahead. Call them. See how that looks. Throwing your own parents out of your house. You're not my parents, I said calmly, my finger hovering over the screen. Not anymore. Mom grabbed his arm, muttering something under her breath. You're going to regret this, she said as they turned to leave. No, I said, shutting the door behind them. I'm not. That was the moment I realized just how much I'd changed. The kid who desperately wanted their approval was gone. I didn't owe them anything, and I wasn't going to let them guilt me into thinking otherwise. After they left, I stood in my living room, phone still in hand, and just stood there. I wasn't upset. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was exhausted. For years, I'd carried this hope, buried deep, that maybe one day they'd see me as their son, their family, as someone who mattered. But that hope, it was gone. That confrontation slammed the door on any lingering illusions I might have had about them. After that day, I thought I'd seen the last of them. I had made it clear they weren't welcome in my life, and I was ready to move on. But people like them don't take no for an answer. They weren't done trying to claw their way back in, and what followed was nothing short of chaos. A couple of weeks later, I found out from my coworkers that my mom had shown up at my office. I wasn't there. I'd taken a sick day, but she apparently caused quite the scene. She marched in, demanded to speak with me, and when she was told I wasn't there, she refused to leave. She was shouting about family and sacrifices and how you owed her, one of my coworkers said the next day. Security had to escort her out. It was intense. I apologized to everyone, mortified. I made sure to notify HR and told them to add her to the list of people who weren't allowed on the premises. Still, I was shaken. I couldn't believe she'd stoop that low. But the worst was yet to come. My mom didn't back off. One evening, about a week later, I got home from work and found her waiting for me outside my house. She was pacing up and down the driveway, clearly agitated. The moment I stepped out of my car, she stormed over, shouting, "You can't keep ignoring me!" she yelled. I took a deep breath, keeping my distance. "What are you doing here?" "We need to talk," she said, pointing her finger at me like I was a child. "You think you can just walk away from your family? From your responsibilities?" "What responsibilities?" I shot back. "You're the parent, not me. The twins are your kids. You're the one who's supposed to figure this out, not me." That set her off. She started screaming about how I was selfish and ungrateful, how I owed her for everything she'd done for me. "I sacrificed so much for you," she shouted. "And this is how you repay me? By turning your back on us?" "You didn't sacrifice anything for me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mom, go back to your home that you kicked your son out of and don't show up again." At that point, her voice went from loud to downright hysterical. She started yelling so loudly that the neighbors came out of their houses to see what was going on. "He's a brat!" she screamed, gesturing wildly at me. "He's always been a selfish little brat. He doesn't care about anyone but himself." A few neighbors tried to intervene, telling her to calm down, but she wasn't hearing it. Her voice grew louder, more frantic, until she lunged at me, screaming, "After everything I've done for you—" "Stay back," I warned, my phone in hand as I started dialing 911. "I mean it, Mom. Don't you dare." Her face twisted in rage, and she made a wild grab for my phone. "Don't you dare call the police on your own mother. I raised you. I sacrificed everything for you. You abandoned me," I shouted back, holding my phone out of her reach, trying to keep her at bay. "You threw me away like I was nothing." It didn't feel like I was arguing with my mom anymore. It was like watching a stranger wearing her face. She was screaming about ingratitude, about family loyalty, while lunging at me, still trying to grab the phone from my hands. Through the chaos, I heard one of my neighbors yelling, "I'm calling the police! Leave him alone!" More neighbors started emerging from their houses, standing on porches or edging closer, watching this surreal scene of a mother physically going after her own child. Finally, someone stepped in and pulled her away from me, just as the sound of sirens cut through the air. She struggled against them, still screaming something incoherent, but the moment was over. As the flashing lights of the police car filled the street, I stood there, shaking, realizing how far she'd gone and how much I couldn't let her back into my life. The next morning, I went straight to the police station and filed a report. I explained everything: the workplace incident, her showing up at my house, the screaming match in front of my neighbors. The officer I spoke to was sympathetic and helped me start the process of getting a restraining order. When I told my grandparents what had happened, they were furious. "She's lost her mind," my grandpa said, shaking his head. "I don't know what's wrong with her, but you don't deserve this. We should have done more for you back then," my grandma added, her voice heavy with guilt. "We thought we were helping by staying close, but we let you face too much on your own. I'm so sorry." I told them it wasn't their fault. They'd done the best they could, and they were the only reason I'd had any kind of stability after my mom kicked me out. They made it clear they were done with her. "We've stood by her through everything," my grandpa said, "but this is the last straw. We're cutting ties." Hearing that was bittersweet. On one hand, it felt like validation. They finally saw her for who she was. But on the other hand, it hurt to know how far she'd fallen and how little she'd cared about anyone but herself. The restraining order was granted a few weeks later, and life finally started to settle down. I poured myself into my career, my house, and the people who truly mattered: my grandparents, my aunt, and my close friends. My aunt, though, she was my rock. She didn't just step in when things got hard. She stayed, and she never made me feel like I owed her anything for it. A few months later, after I'd finally caught my breath, I decided to do something for her. It wasn't about repaying her. It was about showing her how much she meant to me. I didn't just hand her money. I planned it out. I made sure it was enough to cover a weekend getaway for her and her family, something she'd always dreamed about but never prioritized, because she was always putting others first. When I gave her the envelope, she looked confused at first, then opened it and gasped. "What is this?" she asked, her voice shaky. "It's for you," I said simply. "You've always been there for me. You didn't have to, but you did. You deserve something good, something just for you." Her eyes welled up, and she shook her head. "You didn't have to do this. I didn't help you because I wanted anything in return." "I know," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "That's why you deserve it even more." She hugged me tight, and for the first time in years, I felt the kind of love and support I'd spent my whole life chasing. She didn't just see me, she valued me. Meanwhile, every now and then, I'd hear bits and pieces about my mom and Leonard, Their financial situation was crumbling, and the twins were barely making it through college. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel anything. They had made their choices, and I had made mine. For years, I had carried the weight of wanting their approval, of hoping they'd finally see me as someone who mattered. But now, I understood they never would, and that was okay. I didn't need their validation. I saw my own worth now, and I'd surrounded myself with people who did too. I've built a life I'm proud of, filled with people who genuinely care about me. And most importantly, I've learned that family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by the ones who show up, who stand by you, and who love you for who you are, not for what they can take from you. As for my mom, I hope she finds whatever it is she's looking for. But I'm done being her solution. I'm done being her sacrifice. My life is my own now, and I'm not looking back. If anything new pops up, I'll post an update for you guys. Final update. Hey everyone, I didn't think I'd be writing an update, but something unexpected happened, and I feel like it's worth sharing. After everything that went down with my mom and Leonard, the restraining order, the ambush outside my house, and her meltdown, I thought I was done with that part of my life. I'd closed the door and moved on. But then, one of the twins reached out. It started with a text from an unknown number. Hey, it's Max. Can we talk? I'd like to get to know you. You're my brother, and I don't know you at all. I sat there staring at the message for a long time. Max and I barely knew each other after I left home all those years ago. The twins were little kids at the time, and after everything my mom and Leonard put me through, I had no connection with them. Part of me wondered if this was some new ploy by my mom, but the way Max worded his message felt different. After a while, I replied, "What's this about?" A few minutes later, he called. I hesitated before picking up. "Hey," he said, his voice a little nervous. "I know this is random, but I wanted to reach out. I've been thinking about you a lot lately, and I feel like I missed out on something important. You're my brother, and I don't know anything about you. I hate that." I didn't say much, so he kept going. "I know what Mom and Dad did to you," he said. "I didn't understand it when I was a kid, but I do now. I don't think it was right. Honestly, I think it was horrible, and I don't blame you for walking away. But I hate that their choices kept us from having a relationship. That's on them, not you." His words caught me off guard. I didn't expect him to be so honest about the situation. "Max, none of this was your fault," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You didn't make the choices they made." "I know," he said, "but it doesn't make it any easier. I feel like I've missed out on having an older brother, and now that I'm old enough to understand everything, I want to at least try to fix that. I know I can't undo what they did, but I'd like to get to know you if you're open to it." I leaned back in my chair, unsure of what to say. For years, I'd carried the weight of feeling like I didn't matter to my family. But here was Max, reaching out, acknowledging what happened, and asking for a chance to build something different. "Why now?" I asked. "Why reach out after all this time?" "Honestly," he said, "because I don't want us to be strangers forever. I'm not asking you to forgive Mom or Dad, and I'm not trying to make excuses for them. I want to know you. That's it." His tone was so genuine, it was hard not to feel a little moved. "I've spent a long time trying to move on from all of this," I said finally. "It's not easy for me to open that door again." "I get that," he said, "and I'm not asking for anything big. I just want a chance to talk to you, maybe see if we can have some kind of relationship. You're my brother, and I'd like to know who you are." I sat there for a moment, weighing my options. The twins weren't responsible for what happened. They didn't make the decisions that tore our family apart. And if Max was making the effort to reach out, maybe it was worth meeting him halfway. Even though part of me kept telling me that maybe his only intention is take advantage of me, I decided to give him a chance anyway since I don't really know the twin yet. "All right," I said. "We can start with a conversation." His relief was obvious. "Thank you," he said quickly. "That's all I'm asking. I just want to start somewhere." We ended the call shortly after, and I spent the rest of the evening thinking about it. Max reaching out wasn't something I ever expected, and it left me with a mix of emotions I couldn't fully process. The truth is, I'd spent so long seeing the twins as part of the family that had cast me aside. But Max made me realize they were as much victims of my mom and Leonard's selfishness as I was. They didn't choose this any more than I did. I'm not sure where this will go. I'm still cautious. I've built a life for myself that I'm proud of, and I'm not eager to reopen old wounds. But at the same time, Max's effort feels genuine. He didn't try to guilt me or make excuses for his parents. He just wanted to know me. And for the first time, I feel like maybe, just maybe, I could have a relationship with someone from that side of the family. It's a small step, but it feels like progress. Story 3. This story is titled, "My Mother Wants Me and My Siblings." To forgive our older brother for stealing our other brother's fiancée. Years later. Karma hit them so hard and now they are begging. Hey everyone. We put a lot of time and effort into finding these stories to keep bringing you the best content. If you enjoy what we do, it would mean the world if you hit that subscribe button. Your support really makes all the difference and keeps this journey going strong. Thanks so much for being here with me. Now let's start the video. OP starts by saying, I've always thought my family was different. Not in some dramatic movie-style way or anything, but just in how tight we were. Growing up, we had this unspoken rule about loyalty that our parents drilled into us like it was the most important thing in the world. Blood is thicker than water was practically the family motto. Our parents would always say that when they were gone, the only people we could truly rely on were each other. They had this weird way of teaching us about loyalty that looking back was kind of extreme. If one of us snitched on a sibling, it didn't matter who was in the wrong. Both of us would get punished. Like, if Mike stole candy and I tattled, we'd both lose TV privileges for a week. My mom would say, the problem isn't the candy, it's the broken trust. It made no sense to me as a kid, but now I get it. They weren't trying to raise perfect kids. They were trying to raise a family that stuck together no matter what. The thing is, it actually worked. My siblings and I grew up really close. There's Mike, the oldest at 29, who always had this golden aura around him. He was the typical firstborn son type, athletic, popular, and charming. He was the guy everyone wanted to be or be with. Then there's my older sister, Anna, who's 26 and probably the most level-headed of all of us. She's the one you go to when you need advice or someone to help you figure out your life. Luke, 25, is my closest sibling. He's the quiet one, but not in a shy way. He's just thoughtful. And then there's me, the baby of the family at 22, who probably knows way too much about everyone's drama because I'm the one they all vent to. Out of all of us, Luke always felt like he had the most to prove. He wasn't as naturally talented as Mike or as academically gifted as Anna. Everything he achieved, he worked for. While Mike breezed through life, Luke was grinding to get noticed. I think that's why we bonded so much. I saw how hard he tried, and I respected the hell out of him for it. Mike, though? Mike was just that guy. You know the type. The star quarterback who dated the head cheerleader and somehow still aced his math tests. Even as a kid, he had this air about him, like he was destined for bigger things. People were drawn to him, and he loved the attention. But while everyone else saw him as perfect, we knew he could be selfish. He wasn't mean or anything, just thoughtless. He'd take the last slice of pizza without asking or borrow your stuff without returning it. Small things that added up over time. But because he was Mike, no one ever called him out on it. My parents definitely played favorites, even if they didn't mean to. Mike could do no wrong in their eyes. If he got in trouble at school, it was the teacher's fault for not understanding him. If he slacked off at home, they'd say he was just tired from football practice. Luke, on the other hand, had to fight for every scrap of attention. If he brought home a B on his report card, my dad would ask why it wasn't an A. If he made the basketball team, Mike would joke that he was only on the bench. I could see it hurt him, even if he tried to laugh it off. But despite all that, Luke idolized Mike. He wanted so badly to impress him, to be seen as an equal. He worked out religiously to keep up with Mike's physique and even joined the same gym as him. He'd ask Mike for advice about girls, even though Mike's advice was always terrible. It was like he was chasing this impossible standard, trying to prove he was just as good, if not better. And honestly, I think Mike liked having Luke look up to him. It fed into his ego. For a while, though, everything seemed fine. Luke found his own way to stand out, working a great job and building a life he could be proud of. And then he met Sarah. Sarah was, well, she was perfect for Luke. At least that's what we all thought at the time. She was smart, funny, and kind of nerdy in a way that matched Luke's personality. She brought out this side of him that we hadn't seen before. More confident, more relaxed. When he proposed to her after 2 years of dating, we were all over the moon. He was the first of us to get engaged, and it felt like a milestone for the whole family. Even Mike seemed genuinely happy for him, which should have been my first red flag. Looking back, there were signs. Mike and Sarah got along a little too well. At first, it seemed harmless. Sarah was bubbly and outgoing, and Mike was his usual charming self, but sometimes their jokes felt like inside jokes, ones Luke wasn't part of. They'd sit next to each other at family dinners and talk like old friends. Luke never said anything, but I could tell it bothered him. He'd glance at them with this look I couldn't quite read. I didn't think much of it at the time because, like I said, loyalty was everything in our family. The idea that Mike would betray Luke in any way was unthinkable. We were raised to have each other's backs, no matter what. And Sarah? She seemed so genuinely in love with Luke that the thought of her straying never crossed my mind. Luke wasn't the type to open up about his feelings easily. He'd always been the strong, silent one in the family. So when he finally told me he was having doubts about Sarah and Mike, I could tell it wasn't something he'd decided on a whim. It wasn't like he wanted to believe it either. The way he said it, quietly, almost like he didn't want the words to exist, it broke my heart a little. We were sitting in my living room, just the two of us, when he dropped it on me. "Do you ever feel like Sarah and Mike are weirdly close?" he asked, staring down at the coffee table like it had the answer. "Weird how?" I asked, genuinely caught off guard. "I don't know," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's just, sometimes it feels like they're too comfortable around each other, like they have their own thing going on. And I'm just there." I tried to brush it off at first. "They're probably just friendly. Sarah's outgoing like that. And you know how Mike is. He's like that with everyone." Luke nodded but didn't look convinced. "Maybe," he muttered. But then he added almost to himself, "It just doesn't feel right." That night stuck with me. Not because I believed him right away, but because of how much it seemed to hurt him. Luke wasn't paranoid by nature. He didn't jump to conclusions or overreact. If he was feeling this way, it had to be for a reason. Still, I told myself it was just in his head. Sarah loved Luke. They were planning a wedding. Mike might have been selfish sometimes, but he wasn't cruel. It was easier to believe that Luke was imagining things than to confront the possibility that he wasn't. But then I started noticing things. Little things. The way Sarah would glance at Mike when she thought no one was looking. The way Mike seemed to go out of his way to make her laugh. Once, during a family barbecue, Sarah and Mike were sitting together on the patio, deep in conversation. Luke was inside grabbing drinks, and when he came back out, the way Sarah pulled away from Mike was weird, like she'd been caught doing something she shouldn't. I wanted to believe it was nothing. I wanted to chalk it up to my own paranoia, like Luke's suspicions were contagious, and now I was seeing things that weren't there. But the more I watched, the harder it was to ignore. One night, about a month after Luke first confided in me, I decided to test the waters. We were all at Mom's house for dinner. Me, Luke, Mike, Sarah, and Anna. The atmosphere was light and happy, the way it always was when we were together. At one point, I made a joke about how Luke and Sarah were like an old married couple already, always bickering but clearly in love. Everyone laughed, but I noticed Sarah's laugh was a little forced. And Mike? He didn't laugh at all. Instead, he gave this awkward half smile and looked down at his plate. It was such a small thing, but it sent a chill down my spine. If there was nothing going on, why did they both look so uncomfortable? I started paying closer attention after that. Not in a creepy, stalking way, but just observing. Sarah always seemed more animated around Mike. Her eyes would light up when he walked into the room, and she'd lean in just a little too close when they talked. Mike, for his part, seemed to thrive on her attention. He'd tease her in ways that felt less like a brother-in-law and more like something else. One night, I caught Mike looking at Sarah in a way that made my stomach turn. It wasn't a friendly look or even a casual one. It was longing. I remember thinking, no, I'm just imagining things. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. I tried to bring it up with Luke again, but he shut me down. "I don't want to talk about it," he said sharply. "I'm probably just being stupid." "You're not stupid," I said. "If something feels off, you should trust your gut." Luke just shook his head. "Even if I'm right, what can I do? Call them out? What if it's nothing and I just look like an idiot? What if it's something and I lose everything?" I didn't have an answer for that. What could he do? Confronting them would blow up his entire life. Ignoring it would eat him alive. He was stuck in this limbo, doubting himself and the people he loved most. I didn't know how to help him. All I could do was be there for him and hope it was all a big misunderstanding. But the more I watched, the less I believed that. The final straw for me came during another family gathering, about 2 weeks before everything fell apart. We were playing a game of charades, and it was Sarah's turn. She was acting out something, probably a movie or a TV show, and Mike kept shouting out guesses. They were laughing, and the energy between them felt intimate, like they were the only two people in the room. Luke was sitting next to me, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. When the game ended, he got up and went to the bathroom. He didn't come back for a long time. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the way Sarah and Mike interacted. It wasn't just friendly. It wasn't even flirtatious. It was familiar, like they knew each other in a way they shouldn't. I wanted to believe I was wrong, but deep down I wasn't. And I think Luke knew it too. Looking back, I wish I'd said something sooner. Maybe if I had, things would have played out differently. Maybe I could have spared Luke some of the pain he was about to go through. But at the time, I was too scared to rock the boat. Too scared to face the truth. And then the truth came out anyway. The day it all came out started like any other. I wasn't even home when it happened. I got a call from Luke in the middle of the night, his voice shaking like I'd never heard before. He didn't even make sense at first. It was like his words were tripping over each other, and I could hear how wrecked he was through the phone. All I caught were the words Sarah, Mike, and cheating. By the time I got to his place, he was sitting on the couch, head in his hands, looking like he'd just been hit by a truck. There was an empty beer bottle on the floor, and his phone was lying face down on the coffee table like it had betrayed him too. When he finally looked up at me, his eyes were red and swollen, and it was clear he hadn't stopped crying for hours. She left, he said, his voice hoarse. She fucking left. What do you mean she left? Where did she go? I asked, trying to piece it together. To Mike's. He spat the name out like it physically hurt him. She said she's in love with him, that she's been in love with him this whole time. It felt like the air got sucked out of the room. I sat down next to him, stunned. I didn't even know what to say. This wasn't just some fight or a relationship ending. This was our brother, the same guy who was supposed to have Luke's back, the guy we all grew up trusting implicitly. How could he do something like this? She told me she's been sleeping with him for months, Luke continued, his voice breaking. Months. While we were planning the wedding. While I thought she loved me. I didn't realize I was crying until I felt a tear roll down my cheek. I wasn't even sure who I was crying for. Luke, because he didn't deserve this. Or myself, because the family I thought I knew was crumbling right in front of me. Luke's phone buzzed, and we both stared at it like it was a bomb about to go off. He didn't pick it up, but I saw the name on the screen. Mike. That asshole keeps calling, Luke said, his voice hardening. What does he even want? To apologize? To explain? Like there's anything he can say that'll make this better. I didn't have an answer for that either. What could Mike possibly say? Sorry I stole your fiancé? It was so absurd that it almost didn't feel real. The next morning, after Luke finally passed out on the couch, I decided I couldn't just sit there and do nothing. I drove to Mike's house, barely able to see straight through the rage clouding my vision. When he opened the door, he looked like he hadn't slept either. Good. He didn't deserve to. What the hell is wrong with you? I snapped, not even waiting for him to say anything. Do you have any idea what you've done? Mike tried to interrupt, but I didn't let him. No, shut up. You don't get to talk. You don't get to explain this away. You've destroyed him, Mike. Destroyed him. And for what? Some girl. Are you really that selfish? She's not just some girl, Mike finally said, his voice defensive. I love her. I wanted to punch him. I've never wanted to hit someone so badly in my life. You love her? I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Wow, that makes it all better, doesn't it? Forget the fact that she was your brother's fiancée. Forget the fact that you've ruined our family. As long as you're in love, it's fine, right? Mike didn't say anything. He just stood there, looking at me like he was the victim in all of this. It made me sick. You've always been selfish, I said, my voice shaking with anger. But this is a whole new level. I hope she's worth it, Mike, because you've just lost the rest of us. And with that, I walked away. I didn't wait for him to respond because, honestly, I didn't care what he had to say. There was nothing he could say that would make this okay. When I got back to Luke's place, he was awake and sitting at the kitchen table, staring at his phone. He looked up at me, his eyes hollow. Did you talk to him? He asked. Yeah, I said. It didn't help. Luke nodded like he expected that. I don't think I can ever forgive him, he said quietly. Or her. You don't have to, I told him. You don't owe them anything. Over the next few days, the news spread to the rest of the family. Anna was furious. Our dad was livid. He called Mike and tore into him, saying he was no son of his anymore. Our mom, though, she had a different reaction. He's still your brother, she said when I talked to her. People make mistakes. He's in love. You can't blame him for that. Can't blame him? I shot back. He betrayed Luke. He betrayed all of us. How can you just brush that aside? Because he's my son, she said, her voice firm. And I won't turn my back on him. It was like a slap in the face. How could she defend him after what he'd done? How could she expect the rest of us to just move on? But that's exactly what she did. She started visiting Mike and Sarah, acting like everything was fine, like our family hadn't been ripped apart. And every time she tried to get us to forgive him, it felt like she was choosing Mike over the rest of us. Over Luke. I wish I could say that was the end of it, but it wasn't. This wasn't something that could be swept under the rug. It was a betrayal that cut too deep, one that left scars none of us could ignore. And as much as I wanted to move on, to pretend like it didn't matter, I couldn't. Because every time I looked at Luke, I saw the damage Mike and Sarah had done, and it wasn't something any of us would forget. The fallout from Mike and Sarah's betrayal was like a slow-motion car crash. You see it coming, but there's no way to stop it. It didn't just ruin Luke, it tore our entire family apart. It's hard to even pinpoint when it started because once everything was out in the open, there was no going back. Luke was a shell of himself after that night. He stayed at my apartment for a while because he couldn't stand to be in the house he used to share with Sarah. Every little thing reminded him of her. The photos on the walls, the coffee mugs they'd bought together, the stupid TV shows they used to binge. He told me once that the silence was the worst part, like her absence was louder than her presence had ever been. I'd never seen Luke like this before. He was always the strong one, the guy who could handle anything. But now, he looked completely lost. He stopped going to the gym, stopped taking care of himself, and barely ate. I tried to get him out of the house, even just for a walk around the block, but he wasn't interested. He'd just sit on my couch staring at the TV, not really watching it, while his phone buzzed on the table. Mike kept calling. At first, Luke just ignored it, but eventually, he blocked his number. That didn't stop Mike from trying, though. He sent emails, texts from random numbers, even messages through mutual friends. He kept saying he wanted to talk, to explain, but Luke wasn't having it. "What's there to explain?" he said one day, his voice bitter. He wanted her, so he took her. End of story. Our dad was just as angry as Luke, but he showed it differently. He completely cut Mike off. To him, what Mike did wasn't just a betrayal, it was a failure of character, something Dad couldn't forgive. He called me after he found out and said, "That boy isn't my son anymore." I could hear the hurt in his voice, even though he was trying to sound tough. For Dad, loyalty was everything, and Mike had thrown it away. But Mom was a whole different story. She couldn't bring herself to cut Mike off, no matter how much he'd hurt the rest of us. "She's still my son," she kept saying, like that made everything okay. She started visiting Mike and Sarah at their new place, pretending like what they'd done wasn't the giant elephant in the room. Every time I tried to talk to her about it, she'd just brush me off. "You don't understand," she'd say. "He made a mistake, but he's still family." It wasn't just that she forgave Mike. It was that she expected us to do the same. She kept pushing Luke to talk to him, even going so far as to invite Mike over without telling Luke. I still remember the day Luke found out. Mom had planned a family dinner, acting like it was just a normal get-together. Luke agreed to come because he thought it would just be me, Anna, and our parents. But when he walked in and saw Mike sitting at the table, he froze. The tension in the room was suffocating. Luke didn't say a word. He just turned around and walked out. I followed him outside, where he was pacing back and forth, his hands clenched into fists. "Why would she do this?" he asked, his voice shaking with anger. "Why would she think this is okay?" I didn't have an answer. All I could do was tell him what I knew he needed to hear, that he wasn't crazy, that he wasn't overreacting, and that he had every right to cut Mike out of his life if that's what he needed to heal. After that, Luke stopped talking to Mom altogether. It wasn't a dramatic decision. There was no big fight or tearful goodbye. He just stopped picking up her calls. I think it hurt him more than he let on, but he couldn't keep dealing with her constant attempts to reconcile him with Mike. It was like she couldn't understand that some things can't be fixed. Anna handled things differently. She was furious, but in her quiet, calculated way. She told Mike exactly what she thought of him in one scathing phone call, and then blocked his number. She still talked to Mom, but their relationship became strained. Every time Mom brought up Mike, Anna would shut her down. "He's dead to me," she told her once. "Stop trying to bring him back." As for me, I was somewhere in the middle. I couldn't forgive Mike, but I couldn't bring myself to cut Mom off completely, even though her actions felt like a betrayal too. She kept trying to play the peacemaker, but all she was doing was making things worse. At one point, she even suggested we all go to therapy together. Her, Luke, Mike, and me. "We need to fix this," she said, like it was just a broken chair or a leaky faucet. "Fix what?" I snapped. "Luke doesn't need therapy with Mike. Mike needs to take a long look in the mirror and realize he's the problem." She didn't bring it up again after that. The final nail in the coffin came when Mike and Sarah got engaged. I don't know what I expected. Of course, they were going to get married eventually. But seeing the invitation in my mailbox still felt like a punch to the gut. They had the nerve to send it to all of us, like they thought we'd actually show up and celebrate their love. I didn't even tell Luke about it at first because I knew how much it would hurt him. But he found out anyway when Mom brought it up during one of her rare phone calls with him. "She said I should go," Luke told me, his voice flat. "That it's time to move on. Can you believe that?" I could, unfortunately. Mom had been saying the same thing to me and Anna for months. "Family is family," she kept saying. like that was supposed to make everything better. None of us went to the wedding. Not me, not Luke, not Anna, and definitely not Dad. Mom went, of course. She even posted photos on Facebook, smiling like everything was fine. When I saw them, I felt like I didn't even know her anymore. In the end, the fallout wasn't just about Mike and Sarah. It was about the cracks they exposed in our family, the loyalty we thought we had but didn't. Mike's betrayal was the spark, but Mom's refusal to acknowledge the damage made it worse. And now, nothing feels the same. After Mike and Sarah got engaged, the family split became official. It wasn't like we held a meeting or made some grand decision to go separate ways. It just happened naturally, like a crack in the foundation of a house. The damage was already done, and there was no going back. Mike and Sarah moved into their new life, and the rest of us tried to figure out how to navigate what was left of ours. Luke, understandably, had the hardest time. He stayed quiet about his feelings most of the time, but you could see the weight he was carrying. He wasn't the same person anymore. He used to be this driven, confident guy who could take on anything, but now it was like he was just going through the motions. Work, sleep, repeat. He'd stopped talking about the future, stopped mentioning any of the things he used to be excited about. It was like a piece of him had been stolen, and he didn't know how to get it back. We all adjusted in different ways. Dad became colder, more distant. He wasn't the type to share his emotions in the first place, but after Mike's betrayal, it was like he put up an even higher wall. He refused to acknowledge Mike or Sarah's existence, even in casual conversation. If someone accidentally brought them up, he'd change the subject immediately. For him, they were gone. Simple as that. He wouldn't even entertain the idea of reconciliation, which was one of the few things I actually agreed with him on. Anna threw herself into work. She was already a busy person, but now it felt like she was using her job as a way to escape the family drama. She'd always been the mediator, the one who tried to keep the peace, but even she couldn't fix this. I think that realization hit her hard. She stopped coming to family dinners, stopped answering Mom's calls as often. It wasn't that she didn't care. It was more like she couldn't deal with it anymore. And then there was Mom. Out of everyone, she seemed the most determined to pretend like everything was fine. She kept reaching out to Mike and Sarah, acting like they hadn't done something unforgivable. I'd hear about her visiting their place or going out to lunch with them, and every time it felt like a slap in the face. It wasn't just that she forgave them. That was bad enough. It was that she expected the rest of us to do the same. She kept saying things like, "You can't stay mad forever," and "We're still a family." Like repeating it enough times would make it true. One time, she even suggested having a family reunion. "We need to start fresh," she said, like it was that simple. I laughed when she brought it up, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe she actually thought that was a good idea. "Mom, no one wants to start fresh with Mike," I told her bluntly, especially not Luke. "Well, he needs to," she said, her tone sharper than I expected. "Holding on to all this anger isn't healthy. Maybe he's not ready to forgive the brother who stole his fiancée?" I shot back. "Did you ever think of that?" She didn't have an answer, but I could tell she was frustrated. I think part of her was angry at us for not letting go, but the bigger part of her was angry at herself for not being able to fix it. She wanted everything to go back to the way it was before, but that wasn't possible. The divide wasn't just emotional, it was physical too. Luke eventually sold the house he'd shared with Sarah and moved to a new apartment on the other side of town. I helped him pack up his stuff, and it was one of the most depressing days of my life. Every box we taped shut felt like another piece of his old life being erased. He didn't say much while we were packing, but at one point, he held up a photo of him and Sarah from when they first got engaged. He stared at it for a long time before finally throwing it in the trash. "Good riddance," he muttered, but I could hear the pain in his voice. Anna moved too, taking a job in another city about an hour away. She said it was for her career, and maybe that was part of it, but I think she also just needed to get away from all of this. She still visited sometimes, but not as often as she used to. I missed her, but I couldn't blame her for leaving. If I had the chance to escape, I probably would have done the same. As for me, I felt stuck. I couldn't leave because I felt like someone needed to stay behind and hold the pieces together, even if it was a lost cause. I kept in touch with Luke, saw Dad regularly, and talked to Anna whenever she had time. But Mom, our relationship became strained. Every conversation with her felt like a tug of war. She'd try to convince me to reach out to Mike, and I'd try to convince her to stop pretending like nothing was wrong. Neither of us ever won. The worst part was that Mike and Sarah didn't seem to care about the damage they'd caused. They were living their lives, posting happy photos on social media, acting like they hadn't torn the family apart. It was infuriating. I wanted to call them out, to tell them how selfish they were being, but I knew it wouldn't make a difference. People like them don't see themselves as the villains. In their minds, they were just two people in love, and the rest of us were the problem for not accepting it. The divide grew wider with every passing month. Birthdays, holidays, family milestones, they all became sources of tension. If Mom invited Mike and Sarah, the rest of us refused to go. If she didn't invite them, she'd spend the entire time sulking about how incomplete the family felt. It got to the point where we just stopped having family gatherings altogether. It was too complicated, too messy. Looking back, I don't think any of us really knew how to deal with what happened. We were all grieving in our own ways, not just for the relationships we'd lost, but for the family we thought we had. It's hard to explain, but when someone you trust betrays you like that, it changes everything. It makes you question the foundation of everything you believed in. And for our family, that foundation was loyalty. It was the one thing we always thought we could count on, the thing our parents had drilled into us from the beginning. But Mike shattered that. He didn't just betray Luke, he betrayed all of us. And no matter how much Mom wanted to pretend otherwise, there was no fixing it. It's funny how life works sometimes. You think the story is over, the damage done, and then it throws another twist at you. One you didn't see coming but maybe should have. That's exactly what happened with Mike and Sarah. After everything they put Luke through, after all the bridges they burned, karma decided to show up. And when it did, it hit Mike like a freight train. Mike and Sarah got married about 6 months ago. None of us went, of course. Not me, not Luke, not Anna, not Dad. Mom was the only one from our side of the family there, playing proud mother and pretending like everything was fine. She even sent us photos of the ceremony, like we were supposed to be happy for them. I didn't open them. None of us did. As far as we were concerned, Mike and Sarah were out of our lives for good. For a while, it seemed like they were living their perfect little life. They bought a house together, started planning a future, and plastered their social media with pictures of how happy they were. I'd be lying if I said it didn't bother me. After everything they'd done, seeing them so carefree felt like a slap in the face. But I told myself it wasn't worth my energy. They could have their fake happiness. I just wanted them to stay far away from us. Then, a few weeks ago, it all came crashing down. I didn't find out from Mike directly. Of course not. He hasn't spoken to any of us in over a year. It was Mom who called me, her voice frantic and shaky. "Mike needs us," she said, like that was supposed to mean something. "What are you talking about?" I asked, already annoyed. "It's Sarah," she said. "He caught her cheating." For a second, I didn't say anything. I was stunned, but not for the reason Mom probably thought. It wasn't shock. It was something closer to dark amusement. I couldn't help but think, well, isn't that ironic? "Let me guess," I said finally. "With his best friend?" Mom gasped. "How did you know?" I laughed. I actually laughed, even though it probably wasn't the right reaction. "Because that's exactly what he did to Luke," I said. "Looks like karma finally caught up with him." Mom didn't appreciate that. She started going on about how heartbroken Mike was, how he needed his family now more than ever, how we should all rally around him to support him through this. "He made a mistake," she said, as if we hadn't heard that line 1,000 times before. "But he's still your brother." "Mom," I said, cutting her off. "Mike didn't just make a mistake. He destroyed Luke. He tore this family apart. And now you want us to feel sorry for him because Sarah did to him what he did to Luke? Are you serious?" "He's hurting," she insisted. "He didn't deserve this." "Neither did Luke," I snapped. "But you didn't seem to care about that when it was happening." Mom got quiet after that, but I could tell she wasn't giving up. She kept calling, trying to guilt us into reaching out to Mike. She even tried to play the family card again, saying we needed to come together and forgive. But for once, none of us budged. Not Luke, not Anna, not Dad. We were all on the same page. Mike made his bed, and now he had to lie in it. The thing is, I don't feel sorry for him. I can't. This is exactly what he brought on himself. He betrayed Luke in the worst possible way, and now he's getting a taste of his own medicine. I hate to say it, but there's a part of me that feels satisfied knowing he finally understands what he put Luke through. Maybe that makes me a bad person, but after everything that's happened, I don't care anymore. Luke surprised me. When I told him about what happened, I expected him to be angry, or maybe even happy that Mike was suffering. But he just shrugged. "Figures," he said, like it didn't even matter to him anymore. Sarah's always been like that. He just didn't want to see it. "Does it make you feel better?" I asked, curious. He thought about it for a moment before shaking his head. "Not really. It doesn't change anything. He's still out of my life, and that's not going to change." Luke's response made me realize how far he's come. He's not angry anymore. Not at Sarah, not at Mike. He's moved on in a way I'm not sure I have. For him, this isn't about revenge or karma. It's just another chapter in a story he's already closed the book on. Anna, on the other hand, had a lot more to say. Serves him right, she said when I told her. I hope it hurts as much as it hurt Luke. Mom wants us to support him, I added, rolling my eyes. Anna actually laughed. Yeah, that's not happening. If Mom wants to coddle him, she can. But don't expect me to play along. And then there's Dad. He hasn't said much about it, but I can tell he's not interested in mending fences. When I brought it up, he just shook his head and said, that boy made his choices. Now he's got to live with them. For once, we're all in agreement. Mike doesn't deserve our sympathy. He doesn't deserve our support. He made his bed when he betrayed Luke, and now he's lying in it. If Mom wants to keep pretending like he's some tragic victim, that's her choice. But the rest of us? We're done. At the end of the day, this isn't about revenge or schadenfreude. It's about loyalty. Mike broke that loyalty when he chose Sarah over his brother, over his family. He can't expect us to come running back now just because things didn't work out the way he wanted. Life doesn't work like that. So, no, I'm not going to support Mike. None of us are, and honestly, I think that's the way it should be. He made his choices, and now he's dealing with the consequences. That's not our problem anymore. As far as I'm concerned, my family is Luke, Anna, Dad, and me. The rest? They can figure it out on their own. Story 4. This story is titled, My Parents Expected Me to Pay Off My Spoiled Sister's Debt, but I said no and cut them off. Hi, everyone. Before we dive in, a quick favor. If you enjoy content like this, please hit the subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and makes sure you never miss out on amazing videos. All right, let's get started. Hey guys, so this is one of those posts where you just kind of need to vent because I don't even know where to start. Family drama is exhausting, and mine is next level lately. I'm Theo, 30 male, and if you ask anyone who knows me, they'll tell you I've been on my own since I was 18, paid for my own college, worked my butt off, and never asked my parents. But apparently, that doesn't mean I get to live my life in peace. Nope. It just means I'm the family problem solver by default. It all started when my mom called me out of nowhere. Now, my mom, Lorraine, doesn't call for a chat. She's not the kind of mom who calls to ask how your day is or what you had for lunch. If she calls, it's because something's wrong, and she needs me to fix it. So, when her name popped up, I already knew this wasn't going to be good. I answered, and she jumped straight into the awkward small talk, which isn't her thing at all. Hey Theo, how's work? Still doing finance stuff? She asked like she hasn't ignored my job description for the last decade. I played along because I was curious. Yeah, Mom, still doing finance. What's up? That's when she dropped it. Your sister is in trouble. Now I wish I could say I was surprised, but I wasn't. My sister Savannah, 27F, has a long history of creating chaos and expecting everyone else to clean it up. Over the years, her messes haven't just been minor inconveniences. They've been full-blown disasters that always seem to land on my shoulders. Take the time she borrowed my car without asking, only to crash it while texting. She called me in a panic, sobbing about how she didn't know what to do. And like an idiot, I dropped everything to help her out. I dealt with the insurance, paid the deductible, and even let her off the hook for the damage she caused because she swore she'd never do anything like that again. But she did. Or the time she convinced me to co-sign for her first apartment because she just needed a little help to get started. 3 months later, she stopped paying rent, ghosted the landlord, and left me with the fallout. I spent months fighting to fix my credit, while she conveniently moved back in with our parents, acting like it wasn't a big deal. It's not just that she screws up, it's that she never faces the consequences. Every time she messes up, someone, usually me, has to step in to fix it while she plays the victim. And the worst part? She doesn't even show a hint of gratitude. It's like she thinks the world owes her a safety net. So, when my mom called me about Savannah being in trouble, I didn't feel panic or concern. I felt tired of being dragged into her messes, tired of being the one who always pays the price for her recklessness. Honestly, I was more surprised it had taken this long for something big to happen. I sighed, already dreading what I was about to hear. What kind of trouble? I asked. I wasn't asking because I wanted to help. I was asking because I wanted to know just how bad this one was going to be. Then she hit me with it. Savannah had racked up $43,500 in debt. 40 grand. I had to repeat it in my head just to process it. How does someone even get to that point? Apparently, she'd been spending money she didn't have, again. But this time, it wasn't just credit card companies she owed. She'd borrowed money from some shady people, the kind you don't just ignore when the bills pile up. And now, they were coming after her. And my mom's brilliant solution to this mess? Mr. Obviously. Because why wouldn't it be? In her mind, I was the one with the steady job, the responsible sibling, the guy who could always be counted on to fix the unfixable. It didn't matter that Savannah screwed up. That wasn't the issue. The issue was that I wasn't rushing in to save her. You need to help her, she said, like my role as the family ATM had already been decided. I sat there for a second, letting it sink in. I asked, help how, exactly? You've done so well for yourself, Theo. You can pay it off for her, she said, as casually as if she were asking me to swing by and grab takeout. I actually let out a short laugh, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mom, I didn't borrow that money. Why should this be my responsibility? I'm not paying anything. The silence that followed was heavy, like she was processing the fact that I'd just outright refused. Then she snapped, launching straight into full-blown guilt mode. She's your sister. Family helps each other. Do you want her to get hurt? Is that what you want? Her words came fast, almost frantic, like she couldn't believe I wasn't immediately jumping in to save Savannah. It wasn't a request. It was an accusation, as if my refusal was the real problem here, not the choices Savannah had made. I took a deep breath, trying not to lose it. Mom, I've helped her before, multiple times, and what does she do? Blow it all on designer bags, fancy vacations, and God knows what else. She doesn't take responsibility for anything because you and Dad have always bailed her out. I'm not doing it this time, but apparently, that logic didn't register. Savannah's struggling, Theo, she shot back. She's not like you. She's not strong enough to handle this. Struggling? I repeated. She's reckless. She spends money she doesn't have, and now she's in deep with some shady people. And instead of dealing with it herself, she's expecting me to swoop in and clean up her mess. Again. She's your sister, Mom snapped. Family looks out for each other. No, Mom. Family doesn't take advantage of each other, I said, my voice firm. This isn't me turning my back on Savannah. This is me refusing to enable her bad decisions. She needs to grow up and face the consequences for once. Mom wasn't having it. Do you want her to get hurt, Theo? Do you want that on your conscience? Look, I'm not heartless. I don't want anything bad to happen to Savannah, but let's be real here. She's an adult. A 27-year-old adult who knew what she was getting into when she borrowed that money. I told my mom exactly that, but she wasn't having it. She's not as strong as you, Theo, she snapped. You've always had it together, and she hasn't. You can afford to help her. It's the least you can do after all we've done for you. I said, done for me? Like what? Making me pay rent the minute I turned 18? Refusing to help with my college tuition? Yeah, thanks for all that support, Mom. She went silent for a second, but then she came back swinging. If you don't help, we'll have no choice but to cut you off. Do you want that? I couldn't help but laugh. Cut me off from what? You don't support me. I've been on my own for over a decade. Your threats don't work on me. And with that, I hung up. After that day, they were all silent, and I wish I could tell you that was the end of it. But it was just the beginning. And the silence didn't last long. I guess I underestimated just how determined my mom could be when she wanted something. After I shut her and my dad down, they shifted gears. If the direct approach wasn't going to work, they were going to guilt me into submission. And when I say they went all out, I mean all out. It started with the texts. Simple at first. Messages like, I just don't understand how you can let this happen to your sister. Then, as the days went by, they got more dramatic. Do you know the kind of people Savannah is dealing with? They're dangerous, Theo. I can't sleep at night worrying about her. I ignored them at first because, honestly, I didn't have the energy to deal with the manipulation. But they didn't stop. Instead, Mom stepped it up with the voice messages. And let me tell you, she's got this talent for sounding like she's holding back tears, even when she's not. Theo, she said in one, Savannah might not make it out of this if you don't help. I don't think I can live with myself if something happens to her. It was like a masterclass in guilt tripping. If they gave out awards for this kind of thing, she'd be a 3-time champion by now. Then my dad, Marshall, decided to jump in. He's usually more of a silent player in these family dramas. But not this time. He left me a voicemail that started out calm enough. Hey Theo, just calling to check in. But then of course it shifted. Look, I know your mom can come on a bit strong, but this is serious. Savannah's in deep, and we can't fix this without you. You've always been the strong one, the dependable one. Don't let us down now. That line, the dependable one, man, it set me off. I've spent my whole life being the dependable one, and all it's ever gotten me is more responsibility and less appreciation. Dependable doesn't mean I'm a doormat, though apparently they missed the memo. But the guilt avalanche didn't stop there. They decided to bring in reinforcements. The extended family. Out of God knows where, I started hearing from my Uncle Greg, who I hadn't spoken to in years. He called me out of nowhere, acting like we were best friends. Hey Theo, Long time, no talk. How's life? I knew immediately why he was calling, but I let him ramble for a bit before he got to the point. You know, family's important, he said, in that overly earnest tone people use when they're about to say something they know you won't like. And Savannah's she's struggling. We all go through rough patches, and sometimes we need a little help. Greg, listen, I interrupted. Did my mom put you up to this? He laughed nervously, like I'd caught him. Well, she might have mentioned it. I didn't even let him finish. Look, I appreciate you reaching out, but I'm not paying Savannah's debt. It's not my responsibility. You'd think that would have been the end of it, but nope. The next day, it was my Aunt Deborah, then my cousin Emily. They all had the same script. Savannah's in trouble. She needs help, and I'm the only one who can save her. I don't understand why all of them are that concerned about Savannah. It's not like she's some helpless kid who made an honest mistake. She's a grown adult who spends money like it's Monopoly cash and then acts shocked when the bill comes due. What made it worse was that none of them even tried to understand my side. When I explained that I wasn't willing to throw away $43,500 for someone else's mistakes, they acted like I was speaking another language. But she's your sister, they'd say, like that was supposed to magically change my mind. The worst part, though, was the smear campaign. My mom, in her infinite wisdom, decided that if guilt-tripping me directly wasn't working, she'd try to turn the rest of the family against me. She started telling everyone on the family group chat, which I left from it since long ago, that I was self-absorbed, ungrateful, and a total piece of shit. According to her, I had forgotten where I came from and was too wrapped up in my fancy city life to care about my family. I found out about this when my cousin Ryan called me. He's one of the few family members I actually get along with, and he gave me the heads up. Dude, he said, Lorraine's been talking mad crap about you. She told Aunt Deborah that you said Savannah deserves whatever happens to her. I was furious. Not because I care what Deborah thinks, but because my mom was straight up lying about me to make herself look like the victim. I told Ryan the truth, that I never said anything like that, and he believed me. Yeah, I figured she was exaggerating, he said. It's just messy, man. Messy didn't even begin to cover it. But the real drama hit when Savannah decided to jump into the chaos herself. Up until then, she'd been quiet. Not a single text or call. I thought maybe she was embarrassed for once. Turns out she was just waiting to strike. And when she did, it wasn't subtle. She texted me one night, and it wasn't a plea. It was an accusation. I can't believe how selfish you're being, Theo. You know I'm in serious trouble, and you're just sitting there doing nothing. You're supposed to be my brother. Selfish? That was laughable coming from her. Savannah's entire life had been one big string of bad decisions, always with someone else cleaning up her mess. I didn't respond. Honestly, I didn't think it deserved one. The next morning, she upped the ante. You have the money. Stop acting like it's such a big deal. Just pay it off, and I'll pay you back when I can. Like that was somehow a reasonable solution. Like I was the unreasonable one for not handing over the $44,000 to fix her screw-up. Again, I didn't bother to respond. That, of course, didn't go over well. She went full meltdown mode, sending me these long, rambling texts about how I was abandoning her, and how I'd never understand what it's like to struggle. And then, just to twist the knife, she threw in, Mom and Dad always said you'd come around eventually. Guess they were wrong. That line hit different. Not because it made me rethink anything, but because it confirmed what I'd always known. This wasn't just Savannah being reckless. My parents had been hyping her up, making her think I'd always be there to fix her mess. By that point, I was over it. I stopped replying to texts, ignored the calls, and just focused on my own life. Just when I thought they couldn't sink any lower, the guilt trips, the ambushes, the smear campaigns, I realized I'd underestimated just how far they were willing to go. My parents and Savannah had played every card in their deck, or so I thought. Turns out there was one last card hidden up their sleeve, and this one shattered any line I thought they wouldn't cross. I got a call from my bank, and just like that, everything turned into complete chaos. The bank's fraud department informed me about suspicious activity on my account. Apparently, someone had attempted to access it using forged documentation that didn't match their records. They had tried to change my contact details and withdraw funds, but the system flagged the attempt as suspicious and froze it. While the bank couldn't disclose specific details, they hinted that the documentation suggested it was someone close to me. Someone close to me. I didn't need to ask about it. I already knew. Savannah. Who else could it be? The timing was way too convenient. She had just texted me about how desperate she was. And when I didn't cave, this happened. I was boiling inside. Forging documents to access my account? That's not just desperate. That's criminal. I couldn't let this slide. That evening, I drove straight to Savannah's apartment, my anger barely contained. Without a call, of course, because I was done playing nice. She opened the door. "What are you doing here?" she snapped. "You tried to steal from me," I said, cutting straight to the point. Her expression shifted for a split second before she folded her arms. "I don't know what you're talking about." The audacity, though. I told her, "Don't even try that, Savannah. The bank flagged your little stunt. They told me someone forged documents to access my account. Do you even realize how serious that is?" She let out an exaggerated sigh, as if I was being overly dramatic. "Oh, relax, Theo. It's not like I actually got anything." I blinked, stunned at how casually she brushed it off. "Relax? Are you seriously trying to defend this by saying you failed? You tried to commit fraud, Savannah. That's a crime." She shrugged, completely unbothered. "What else was I supposed to do? You left me no choice. You refused to help me when I needed it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. No choice? Savannah, you had every choice. You could have owned up to your mistakes, taken responsibility, and figured out how to fix this yourself, but instead, you thought stealing from me was the solution? She scowled. "Don't act all high and mighty. Mom and Dad said you'd never let me struggle. They told me you'd come around eventually if I pushed hard enough. I just had to wait for you to get over your little tantrum." I stood there, stunned. Little tantrum? That wasn't frustration boiling in my chest. It was rage. This wasn't just her being reckless. This was years of my parents coddling her, feeding her delusions, and treating me like I existed solely to clean up her messes. "Unbelievable," I muttered, more to myself than to her. "Do you even understand what you've done, Savannah? You crossed a line. A big one." She rolled her eyes, doubling down instead of backing off. "I'm not the villain here, Theo. You are. You've turned your back on family. If you'd just helped me in the first place, none of this would have happened." That was it. The final straw. I took a deep breath, not because I wanted to stay calm, but because I needed to make sure I didn't say something I'd regret later. "I'm done," I said, turning toward the door. But before I left, I looked back at her one last time. "If you ever try something like this again, I won't just cut you off. I'll make sure the cops know exactly what you did. Grow up, Savannah. You're not a child anymore." I didn't wait for her response. I headed back to my car, my mind racing. How did it get this bad? How had my family gotten so toxic that my own sister thought it was okay to steal from me and blame me for it? I knew this was it. There was no coming back from this. I had to cut ties for good. But I knew it wasn't going to be that simple. My parents weren't going to let this go. Savannah wasn't going to let this go. And if they thought I was just going to roll over and take it, they were dead wrong. And I was right. The next day, my mom called. I didn't pick up, but she left a voicemail. "Theo, your sister told me what happened," she said. "I can't believe you threatened her like that. She's struggling. And instead of helping her, you're making things worse. You should be ashamed of yourself." I played the message 3 times, just to make sure I heard her right. Savannah tried to steal from me, and somehow I was the bad guy? It was so ridiculous. I didn't respond. What was the point? They weren't going to see reason, but that didn't mean I was just going to let it slide. I called my bank and asked them to tighten the security on my account. Password changes, 2-factor authentication, the works. I wasn't about to give Savannah, or anyone else, another chance to mess with my finances. For a few days, things were quiet. Too quiet. But if there's one thing I've learned about my parents, it's that they don't take no for an answer. At least not the first 100 times you say it. Don't tell me in the comments that I could just say no, because they do not understand it. So, when I came home from work a few days later and found their car parked in my driveway, I wasn't exactly shocked. Annoyed? Sure. Shocked? Not at all. I took a deep breath, parked behind them, and sat in my car for a minute, mentally preparing myself. I knew they weren't here for a friendly chat. They weren't here to apologize or try to make amends. No, this was going to be another round of guilt, manipulation, and emotional blackmail. And honestly, I was already exhausted just thinking about it. When I finally stepped out of my car, my mom was standing by the front door, looking like she was about to deliver some kind of lecture. My dad was staring at the ground like he'd rather be anywhere else. My mom said the moment I got close enough, "We need to talk." "I don't think we do, Mom. I think everything that needs to be said has already been said." She ignored me, of course. "This nonsense has gone on long enough. We're your parents. Savannah is your sister. This isn't how families behave." I unlocked the door and stepped inside, fully expecting her to follow me in. And of course she did, with Dad trailing behind her like a lost puppy. "You're just going to walk away while we're talking to you?" Mom snapped. "No, I'm going inside my house so I don't have to stand outside listening to more of your nonsense," I replied. "If you're going to lecture me, you might as well do it where I'm comfortable." She didn't appreciate my tone, but honestly, I didn't care. She'd already crossed every boundary I'd tried to set, so why bother pretending I was okay with this? My mom wasted no time jumping into her usual spiel. Theo, you need to stop this stubbornness. Savannah is struggling, and it's your responsibility as her brother to help her. She's family. Yeah, family. I totally get it. So I said, let me tell you something about family, Mom. Family doesn't lie, steal, and manipulate to get what they want. Family doesn't expect one person to sacrifice everything while someone else coasts through life without consequences. So don't come in here lecturing me about family. My dad finally spoke up. This isn't about taking sides, Theo. It's about fixing things. You're the only one who can do that. I laughed bitterly. Fix things? You mean like paying off Savannah's debt? Covering for her fraud attempt? Letting her get away with everything like she always does? Yeah, no thanks. I'm done fixing things for her. She's your sister, Mom said, her voice rising. Do you know what it would do to her if something happened? How would you live with yourself? And how do you live with yourselves? I shot back. You've spent her entire life enabling her, making excuses for her, and throwing me under the bus whenever it's convenient. You created this problem, not me. So don't you dare try to make me feel guilty for not cleaning up your mess. Mom's face turned red. I thought she might actually explode. She said, if you're not going to help, then we'll have no choice but to cut ties with you. No holidays, no family gatherings, nothing. I stared at her, trying to decide if she really thought that was a threat. Mom, I've been on my own my whole life. You cutting me off is like firing someone who already quit. She opened her mouth to argue, but Dad cut her off. Lorraine, stop. This isn't helping. He turned to me, his expression softer. Theo, we just want what's best for everyone. Savannah's made mistakes, sure, but she's still family. Can't you just meet us halfway? I couldn't bear it anymore. Do you even hear yourselves? You're asking me to shell out $43,500 for someone else's mistakes. How is that halfway? What is Savannah contributing to this so-called compromise? I could feel the rage boiling in my chest, my thoughts racing faster than I could speak. Every sacrifice I'd made, every time I'd stepped up when they wouldn't, every single instance of them putting Savannah first, all of it slammed into me at once. I pushed off the counter, my movements deliberate, and walked to the door. My heart was pounding, but I kept my face calm. No yelling, no arguing. They didn't deserve that much energy from me anymore. I swung the door open wide and said, "Get out." My mom blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me?" "I said get out," I repeated. "This conversation is over. You're not going to guilt me into paying Savannah's debt, and you're not going to manipulate me into feeling bad about it. So unless you have something productive to say, you can leave." Mom looked like she wanted to argue, but Dad gently took her arm. "Come on, Lorraine, let's go." She glared at me as she walked past, her voice dripping with venom. "You'll regret this, Theo. Mark my words." I shut the door behind them and stood there. It was quiet. Finally quiet. But the quiet didn't last long. The whole situation had been gnawing at me, and against my better judgment, I decided to find out what was going on with Savannah. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe I just wanted to know how far things had spiraled. I reached out to a mutual friend who still kept in touch with her, hoping they'd fill in the blanks. "What's going on with Savannah?" I asked. "I haven't heard anything since, well, you know." The friend didn't hesitate. "Oh, you haven't heard? It's bad. The people she owes money to aren't messing around. They trashed her car, completely destroyed it. Windows, tires, everything. She's freaking out, saying she doesn't feel safe." I should have felt something, pity, concern, something, but all I felt was exhaustion. She'd gotten herself into this mess, and now she was reaping the consequences. Of course, I knew this would only mean one thing: more pressure from my parents to step in and save her. A few days passed, and still no direct contact from Savannah or my parents. Just silence. It felt strange, like the calm before a storm. And sure enough, the storm came. A letter from a lawyer. When I opened it, I couldn't believe what I was reading. My parents were threatening legal action, claiming I had a moral obligation to support my family. They wanted me to pay Savannah's debt, and they were actually willing to take me to court over it. I couldn't believe it. After everything they'd already done, they were willing to go this far? Part of me wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all, but mostly I just felt numb. This wasn't a family anymore. It was a battleground, and I was done fighting. Or, what baffled me is the sheer audacity of it all. It was almost impressive. Look how silly it sounds, my own parents, threatening legal action because I wouldn't clean up Savannah's $43,500 mess. It was like they'd thrown out any remaining pretense of being a family and replaced it with outright hostility. I didn't need to think twice about what to do next. The first call I made was to my lawyer, who, thankfully, has a good sense of humor. When I explained the situation, he chuckled and said, "Theo, they don't have a leg to stand on. Let them file if they want. It'll get laughed out of court." Sure enough, nothing came of their threat, but it was a reminder of how toxic they were and it only reinforced my decision to go no contact. They had burned every bridge, and there was no coming back from that. Knowing they were willing to go that far was enough for me. I realized I couldn't keep this door open anymore, not even a crack. I'd been holding out some tiny shred of hope that maybe, somehow, we could fix things. But this was the last straw. I blocked my parents' numbers that same day. No calls, no texts, no voicemails. I went through my social media and blocked them there too. While I was at it, I did the same for Savannah. If they were going to treat me like an enemy, then I'd treat them like strangers. I also had to tell the extended family what had happened. I knew my parents would spin the story to make me look like the villain, and I wasn't about to let them get away with it. So I called up my cousin Ryan, one of the few family members I actually trust, and laid everything out. "Dude," Ryan said after I finished explaining, "that's insane? They seriously tried to sue you?" "Not yet," I said, "but they're threatening to. I wanted to give you the heads up because I'm sure they're going to start spreading lies about me." "Don't worry," Ryan said. "I've got your back. And honestly, good for you for cutting them off. They sound toxic as hell." That conversation gave me the confidence to reach out to a few other relatives. Some were supportive, like Ryan, but others, not so much. My Aunt Deborah, for example, was firmly Team Lorraine. "Theo, they're your parents," she said, as if that somehow excused everything they'd done. "You can't just walk away from them?" "Yes, I can," I said firmly. "And I have. They've crossed every line imaginable, and I'm not going to let them keep dragging me down." I knew Deborah thought that I am a kind of disappointment. Shay said, "Family is family, Theo. You'll regret this someday." "Maybe," I said, even though I didn't believe it. "But for now, I'm choosing peace." And peace was exactly what I got. Only for a few days, though. Because, of course, about a week after I blocked them, I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Theo," came my mom's voice, sharp and accusatory. "You blocked me." I sighed, already regretting my decision to pick up. "Yes, Mom. I blocked you." "Why would you do that?" she demanded, as if the answer wasn't glaringly obvious. "Because I'm done," I said. "I'm done with the manipulation, the guilt trips, the lies, the demands. I'm done with all of it." She scoffed. "You're being ridiculous. Do you really think you can just cut us out of your life like this?" "Yes," I said simply. "I can, and I have." She tried to argue, of course. She called me selfish, ungrateful, heartless, the usual. But I didn't take the bait. I just calmly repeated that I wasn't interested in continuing this conversation, and hung up. Then I blocked the number. After that, I doubled down on the no-contact plan. I told Ryan to let me know if my parents or Savannah tried to reach me through him, but otherwise I didn't want to hear anything about them, and for the most part, he respected that. Every now and then, though, he'd slip in an update. Months passed, and the longer I stayed no contact, the more I realized how much I'd been missing out on. Without the constant drama, I had so much more time and energy to focus on the things that actually mattered. Of course, there were still moments of doubt. Every now and then, I'd hear a voice in the back of my head saying, "What if they're right? What if you are being selfish?" But then I'd remind myself of everything they'd done, everything I'd endured, and the doubt would fade. Up until now, I didn't know what happened to Savannah. Recently, I got another call from Ryan. "Hey, just thought you'd want to know. Savannah filed for bankruptcy." I paused for a moment, letting the news sink in. "Well," I said finally, "maybe now she'll learn to take responsibility for her actions." "Maybe," Ryan said, though we both knew it was unlikely. Savannah wasn't exactly the learn from your mistakes type. As for my parents, they kept up their smear campaign for a while, but eventually it seemed to fizzle out. I guess even their most loyal supporters got tired of hearing the same story over and over again. By the time the holidays rolled around, I felt some kind of relief, because I knew I wouldn't have to spend Christmas pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. Instead, I spent the holidays with friends, my chosen family, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was walking on eggshells. I could just be myself, without the constant weight of my parents' expectations or Savannah's demands dragging me down. Cutting them off wasn't easy. It was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made. But looking back, I know it was the right one. Sometimes you have to walk away from toxic people, even if they're family. And while it's not always easy, it's worth it. I still get the occasional update from Ryan, though I've made it clear I don't want to hear much. Last I heard, my parents were still trying to rebuild their reputation, and Savannah was struggling to find her footing after the conviction. I wish I could say I felt bad for them, but I don't. They made their choices, and now they're living with the consequences. As for me, I refuse to be a fool dancing on the strings held by all of those big shots. I'm moving forward, and I've surrounded myself with people who actually care about me and respect my boundaries. I'm focusing on my career, my hobbies, and my happiness. And while I don't know what the future holds, I know one thing for sure. I'll never let anyone, family or not, drag me down again. Thanks for sticking with me through this wild ride. If you've got toxic people in your life, I hope my story gives you the courage to stand up for yourself. You deserve better. We all do. Story 5. This story is titled, My Wife Swapped Our IVF Embryo for Her Ex's, so I swapped her out of my entire life. So I'm sitting here at 3 a.m. typing this on my phone because I can't sleep, and I figure some of you might learn something from the absolute train wreck my life turned into. Fair warning, this is going to be a long one. I'm Jack, 32 male, and up until a few months ago, I thought I had a pretty decent life with my wife Emma, 31 female. We had the house in an okay neighborhood, both making good money, and to everyone on the outside, we were that couple that seemed to have their shit together. You know the type. We even had this giant Maine Coon cat named Thor, who was basically our first kid, huge orange fluffball, that would sleep on my chest every night and attack my feet every morning at exactly 5:30 a.m. like clockwork. Emma always said Thor was more my cat than hers. She wasn't wrong. He'd follow me around the house like a dog and would sit in the bathroom sink while I got ready for work. For 2 years, we'd been trying to have a kid. 2 freaking years. At first, it was exciting, like, hey babe, tonight might be the night. But after months of negative tests, it just became this dark cloud hanging over us. Every month was the same. Hope, disappointment, silence, repeat. We'd just sit there not talking because what was there to say? Better luck next time? Yeah, right. I remember this one night, after another negative test, Emma just sat on the bathroom floor crying. I didn't know what to say anymore. All our friends were having kids left and right, posting their perfect family pics on Instagram, and we were stuck in this loop of disappointment. After a bunch of tests, the doctors couldn't find anything specifically wrong with either of us. Just one of those unexplained infertility cases that drive you nuts because there's nothing to actually fix. Emma suggested IVF one night. Her voice was all shaky when she said, "It's our best chance." I didn't even hesitate. Said yes right away because I thought we were in this together, you know? I mean, that's what marriage is supposed to be, right? A team? The financial hit was tough. Insurance only covered part of it, so we dipped into our savings. But I figured it would be worth it in the end. We'd finally have our family. She took over everything with the IVF process. Said I was already stressed with work and she'd handle all the appointments. Just routine stuff, she'd say. The clinic will call if they need anything important, and I trusted her completely. I did go to a few key appointments. When we went in for the actual embryo transfer, I was right there holding her hand, while the doctor explained everything. I remember thinking this was our special moment, the beginning of our family. I even took a picture of us in the clinic room to remember the day our kid's life began. The first few months after the procedure worked, everything seemed perfect. Emma was finally pregnant. The morning sickness wasn't too bad, and we started turning the spare room into a nursery. I painted the whole thing myself over a weekend. Thor kept trying to help by walking through the paint tray and then across the carpet, so that was fun to clean up. We were even on the same page about not wanting to know the gender. Wanted it to be a surprise. Emma had names picked out for either option. We were making plans, building a future. At least that's what I thought we were doing. Her pregnancy was going smoothly. She hit the 5-month mark and was finally showing for real, not just the is she pregnant or did she have a big lunch kind of showing. I was getting more excited about becoming a dad with each passing week. Already had a list of dad jokes ready to go and everything. I started putting together the crib one night, and man, those instructions might as well have been written in ancient Egyptian. Took me like 3 hours and a YouTube tutorial to figure it out. Thor kept jumping in the box and attacking the little Allen wrench. Not helpful, buddy. At this point, I was doing all these little things to prepare. Reading those what to expect books that Emma bought, downloading apps that tell you how big the baby is each week. Your baby is now the size of an avocado. All that stuff that first-time dads do. Then one random Tuesday night, I was going through some boring insurance paperwork, just making sure everything was covered for the delivery. Emma was already asleep, and I was at the kitchen table with Thor purring in my lap, sorting through all the medical forms and bills we'd collected. That's when I noticed something weird. A sperm donor ID that wasn't mine. Not my name, not my patient number from the clinic. Some completely different code. At first, I thought I was just tired and reading it wrong, but I checked it again, compared it to my own patient number from another form. No match. That was the moment everything in my chest went cold. I told myself it had to be some mistake. The clinic probably just messed up the paperwork. There's no way this was real, right? I mean, Emma wouldn't... She couldn't... I didn't sleep that night. just lay there staring at the ceiling, wondering if I even knew who she was anymore. The next morning, I waited until she left for work, then drove straight to the IVF center. I remember sitting in the parking lot for like 20 minutes, just trying to work up the courage to go in. Because deep down, I think I already knew. When I finally walked in, the receptionist gave me this weird look, but I kept it cool. Super polite, just asking for information. Hi, I was reviewing some paperwork for my wife's treatment, and I noticed something strange. Can you confirm which embryo was used for our procedure? The receptionist, Melissa according to her name tag, smiled and started typing away at her computer. Then I saw her face change. That little frown. The slight head tilt. My stomach dropped before she even said a word. That's odd, she said, squinting at her screen. It looks like the embryo used wasn't the one initially assigned to your case. I felt my heart pounding in my ears. What do you mean? It looks like a donor specimen was used instead. She looked up at me with this confused expression. But that should have required your signed consent. I just stared at her, trying to keep my voice steady. I never signed anything. She checked the file again. It says here that your wife authorized the change. Everything inside me went cold. So you just switched embryos without checking with me? Her face went white. That's not supposed to happen. We have policies to prevent that. Then explain how it did, I said, trying not to lose it in the middle of the waiting room. She started mumbling about getting a supervisor, but I was already heading for the door. I needed to confront Emma. Now I called my boss on the drive home, told him I had a family emergency. I must have sounded as messed up as I felt because he didn't even ask questions. Just told me to take whatever time I needed. I drove way too fast, my mind racing with a million thoughts. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I was shaking from rage. I remember thinking as I put my key in the door that this moment was going to be the line in my life. Everything before now and everything after. And I was right. I walked into the house and slammed the door behind me. Thor bolts from his window perch like I just set off a firecracker. Poor dude hated loud noises. I expected Emma to be at work, but there she was, sitting on our couch crying. Her face was all red and puffy, hands shaking as she wiped her eyes. I barely made it inside when she said, "You went to the IVF center?" It wasn't even a question. That's when I knew for sure this wasn't some mix-up. She knew exactly what I'd found out. I just stood there staring at her, not saying a word. Honestly, I was afraid if I started talking, I'd start yelling, and I've never been the yelling type. My friend Olivia works there, she whispered. She texted me that you were asking questions. She told me you were upset. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. Is that the same friend who helped you switch the embryos? She sucked in a breath, her whole body flinching. That was all I needed to see. She knew exactly what she'd done. Why? My voice came out ice cold. I didn't recognize it as my own. She rubbed her face, looking anywhere but at me. At one point, she tried to reach for my hand, and I stepped back like she was trying to hand me a snake. You wouldn't understand, she finally said, still not meeting my eyes. I wanted the best for our child. I wanted strong genes, healthy genes. Meaning? She hesitated, then finally said, I used an anonymous donor from the clinic's database. Someone with better genetic traits. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Better than mine? I laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because this wasn't just a betrayal. This was straight up insanity. The donor has no family history of heart disease or cancer, she rushed to explain. He's tall, athletic, has a doctorate in biochemistry. I wanted to give our baby the best start. You know what's messed up? My dad had a minor heart condition. Nothing serious, just needed medication. Emma knew that. She was basically saying my family's genes weren't good enough for her. So you decided that without telling me? You just erased me from our child's life? And you thought that was your decision to make? She stood up, arms wrapped around her belly protectively. It's still our baby, Jack. You'll still be the father in every way that matters. Except actually being the father, I shot back. Except for the part where you lied to me for months. Except for the part where you went behind my back and made this massive decision without me. Thor had crept back into the room and was sitting in the corner, eyes wide, watching us. Even the cat knew this was bad. I was trying to do what's best for our family, she said, her voice cracking. I thought you'd understand if I just what? Found out after the baby was born? When were you planning to tell me, Emma? Or were you just hoping I'd never find out? That I'd raise some stranger's kid thinking it was mine? She didn't answer that, which was an answer itself. I ran my hands through my hair, trying to think. And this friend of yours at the clinic, Olivia? She just helped you commit fraud? Because that's what this is. You forged my consent. You lied on medical documents. Emma's eyes went wide. It wasn't like that. Olivia just helped with the paperwork. She didn't forge anything. Right, she just conveniently forgot to get my signature before swapping out my sperm for some random donor. There was a long silence. Emma kept opening her mouth like she wanted to say something, then closing it again. Finally, she sat back down, shoulders slumped. I thought I was doing the right thing. I really did. I grabbed my keys from the counter. I need to get out of here. I need to think. Where are you going? Her voice was small. Anywhere but here. As I headed for the door, she called after me. Jack, please, we can work through this. We're having a baby. I turned back to her. No, Emma. You're having a baby. I'm apparently just the guy who's supposed to pay for it. I grabbed Thor's carrier from the closet, scooped him up despite his protests, and threw some of his food in a bag. No way was I leaving him behind. You're taking the cat? She asked, incredulous. Yeah, I'm taking the cat. At least he's actually mine. I walked out, not knowing where I was going, just knowing I couldn't stay there another minute without saying things I couldn't take back. It wasn't until I was halfway down the block that the weight of it all really hit me. Everything I thought I had, everything I built, it was all a lie. Thor meowed from his carrier in the passenger seat, his little paws pressing against the mesh like he was trying to figure out what was going on. Yeah, buddy. Same. It's just you and me now, buddy, I told him, feeling like an idiot for talking to my cat. But honestly, at that moment, he was the only family I had left. I drove around for hours with no real destination. Just me and Thor cruising the streets while I tried to wrap my head around how my life had imploded in a single day. Eventually, I ended up at my buddy Mark's place. Didn't even call first. Just showed up at his door with a cat carrier, and probably looking like I'd seen a ghost. Dude, what the hell? Was Mark's greeting when he opened the door. Then he took one look at my face and added, Shit, get in here. I gave him the short version while he grabbed us both beers from his fridge. His reaction was pretty much what you'd expect. Lots of what the actual fuck and she did what. Mark's girlfriend Jen came home while I was mid-story and immediately went into crisis mode, setting up the spare room for me and getting a makeshift litter box for Thor. I think I was still in shock because I just let them handle everything while I sat on their couch staring at nothing. That night, I couldn't sleep. Just laid there in their guest bed with Thor purring on my chest. I turned my phone off when Emma called for the 8th time. I just couldn't deal with more lies. The next morning, I called my lawyer. I'll call her Vanessa. She's this badass woman who helped my brother through his divorce a few years back. When she asked what was going on, I laid it all out. If I leave her now, what happens with the baby? I asked. She looked over my case and frowned. You're legally presumed the father since you're married, unless you challenge paternity in court. If you don't contest it fast, you could still be on the hook for child support, even though it's not biologically yours. I almost threw up right there in her office. Emma had nearly trapped me permanently. What if I prove she committed fraud? Vanessa tapped her pen on the desk. That changes everything. If we can show she deliberately misled you, you won't be financially responsible. But we need solid proof. The fertility clinic's documentation helps, but ideally, we need her to admit it on record or in writing. And our assets? Move them now. If she files first, she can argue for half of everything. I had a lot to process, but something was still bugging me about Emma's story. The anonymous donor with perfect genes thing seemed convenient. Too convenient. Can we subpoena the actual donor records from the clinic? I asked. Vanessa nodded. We can try. They'll fight it on privacy grounds, but given the circumstances, we might have a shot. What are you thinking? I'm thinking my wife is still lying to me. Over the next few days, I started getting my shit together. First thing I did was pull most of our money out of our joint accounts, leaving just enough that she wouldn't immediately notice it was gone. Probably not the most ethical move, but at that point I wasn't feeling particularly ethical. I moved all my important documents to Mark's place. Birth certificate, passport, the deed to my car. I even called the credit card companies to freeze any new charges on our shared cards. Emma kept calling and texting. Stuff like, please come home and we need to talk about this, and I still love you. I ignored most of it, just sent one text saying I needed space. Meanwhile, Vanessa was working on getting access to the donor records. The clinic was fighting it, claiming patient confidentiality, but the judge was sympathetic to my situation. Apparently, fraud will do that. On day 5 of staying at Mark's, I finally agreed to meet Emma at a coffee shop. Neutral territory, public place where I wouldn't lose my cool. I got there early and picked a table in the corner. When she walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked terrible. She sat down across from me, hands immediately reaching for mine across the table. I pulled back. Jack, please, she started. I know I messed up. I know you're angry, but we can fix this. Fix what exactly? I asked. The fact that you lied to me for months? The fact that you decided my genetics weren't good enough for our child? She flinched. That's not what it was about. I just wanted the best for our baby. Yeah, you said that. But this anonymous donor story, is that even true? Her eyes darted away for a split second. Bingo. Of course it's true, she said, but her voice had that slight quiver that I knew meant she was lying. I leaned forward. Who is it really, Emma? Because I'm going to find out one way or another. That meeting at the coffee shop didn't go anywhere. Emma stuck to her anonymous donor story, despite me catching her in the lie. We ended up leaving with nothing resolved except me feeling even more certain she was hiding something big. I went back to Mark's place, where Thor was living his best life, getting spoiled by Jen who kept sneaking him treats when she thought I wasn't looking. At least someone was happy in this whole mess. For the next week, I was basically living two lives. During the day, I'd go to work, pretend everything was fine when coworkers asked about Emma and the baby. Then I'd head to meetings with Vanessa, or spend hours documenting everything I could about our finances and the IVF situation. I even drove back to the house one day when I knew Emma would be at her prenatal appointment. Felt weird using my own key to sneak into my own home, but I needed to grab more clothes and check if there was anything else I should take. That's when I found Emma's laptop. She always kept it password protected, but I knew her passwords. She used the same 3 for everything and had me write them down once when she forgot them. Classic Emma move, being secretive but also disorganized. I hesitated for about 2 seconds before logging in. Normally, I'd never go through someone's private stuff, but normal went out the window when she decided to lie about our kid's paternity. At first, I didn't find much. Just work emails, Amazon orders, pregnancy forums. Then I checked her email trash folder. I found deleted messages between Emma and her friend Olivia from the clinic, dating back almost a year. They were planning the whole thing. Olivia telling Emma when she'd be working so she could handle the paperwork. Emma asking if it was really possible to use a different donor without me finding out. But the real deal was an email thread with someone named Ryan. The subject line was, are you sure about this? I felt my stomach drop as I opened it and started reading. Ryan Matthews, her college boyfriend, the one she dated for 4 years before me, the one she used to mention now and then when talking about her past, the one whose Facebook profile she'd occasionally check just to see what he's up to. The emails were friendly at first, catching up, how's life been, that kind of thing. Then Emma mentioned our fertility struggles and how she'd been thinking about him a lot lately, how they'd always talked about having kids together back in college. Then I saw the text that made my stomach twist, told him she was using his sperm from when he donated to the clinic years ago. Apparently, he'd been a regular donor during med school for extra cash. His response? Surprise, but not anger. He asked if I knew and was okay with it. Emma straight up told him, Jack doesn't need to know. What he doesn't know won't hurt him. I took pictures of everything with my phone. My hands were shaking so bad, some of the shots came out blurry. I forwarded key emails to my own account, then deleted the forwarded messages from her sent folder and emptied her trash again. The whole time, I felt like I was going to throw up. It wasn't just some perfect genes donor, it was her ex-boyfriend. She wanted to have his baby, not mine. I must have sat there for 20 minutes just staring at the wall after I closed the laptop. Everything made sense now. The secrecy, the lies, why she was so insistent on handling all the IVF appointments herself. When I got back to Mark's place, I sent everything to Vanessa. She called me almost immediately. This changes everything, she said. This proves premeditation and deliberate deception. The judge is going to have a field day with this. What's our next move? I asked, feeling weirdly calm despite the chaos. We keep gathering evidence, and we find this Ryan guy. It wasn't hard to find him. Ryan Matthews, physical therapist, working at a clinic about 30 minutes from our house. I looked him up online and recognized him immediately from pictures Emma had shown me years ago. Tall, athletic build, the kind of guy who probably played sports in college. The kind of guy who donates sperm because clinics pay extra for tall, athletic donors. I made an appointment under a fake name. Probably not the most ethical thing, but ethics weren't my priority anymore. The look on his face when I walked into his treatment room, instead of the Mark Johnson he was expecting. Priceless. Pure shock, then recognition, then something that looked a lot like guilt. Jack, he said, frozen in place. What are you doing here? I closed the door behind me. I think you know exactly why I'm here. To his credit, he didn't try to deny anything, just sat down heavily on his stool and ran his hand through his hair. She told me you agreed to it, he said finally. Said you two had talked about using a donor and that you were fine with it being me. And you believe that? That I'd be okay with my wife having her ex-boyfriend's baby? He winced. Looking back, no, it doesn't make sense, but Emma can be convincing. Tell me about it, I muttered. For what it's worth, I didn't know she was lying to you. I wouldn't have agreed if I'd known. I wasn't sure if I believed him, but it didn't really matter. The damage was done. So what happens now? He asked. Are you going to punch me or something? I almost laughed. Number, I just wanted to see if you'd lie to my face like she did. I turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing. Did you two reconnect before or after we started trying for a baby? He looked confused. Before, I guess? She reached out maybe 3 years ago, said she was in town and wanted to grab coffee. We've been in touch on and off since then. 3 years. The whole time we were planning our family, she was laying the groundwork for this. I nodded and walked out, feeling like the last piece of the puzzle had finally fallen into place. I drove around for hours trying to process everything. The betrayal was so much deeper than I'd initially thought. This wasn't just Emma making a messed up decision about genetics. This was Emma planning for years to have her ex's baby while married to me. I finally headed back to Mark's place around midnight. He and Jen were already asleep, but Thor was waiting by the door like he knew I needed some company. I scooped him up and just sat on the guest bed, petting him while I tried to figure out what to do next. The next morning, I called Vanessa and told her about my conversation with Ryan. This is gold, she said. But we need more. Can you get Emma to admit any of this in writing? Text messages, emails, anything? So I did something I'm not proud of. I texted Emma saying I wanted to talk things through, that maybe I was overreacting about the anonymous donor thing. I told her I was willing to listen if she'd just be honest with me. She responded immediately, obviously relieved that I was coming around. We agreed to meet at our house that evening. Before going over, I had one more conversation with Vanessa. We went over the plan for protecting my assets and my future. She had already prepared the divorce papers, just needed my final go-ahead. When I got to the house, Emma had clearly gone all out trying to make it nice. The place was spotless. She'd made my favorite dinner, even put flowers on the table. Like this was some minor disagreement we were patching up. Jack, she said, rushing to hug me when I walked in. I let her, but didn't hug back. I've missed you so much. We need to talk, I said, not sitting down even though she gestured toward the dining table she'd set. Of course, she said quickly. I want to explain everything. Good, because I have questions, I said, pulling out my phone and hitting record. I started recording. So, tell me again about this donor. The anonymous one with the perfect genes. She launched into the same story she'd told before, about wanting the best genetic profile, about making the choice out of love for our future child. I let her finish, then said, and there's no other reason you chose this particular donor? She hesitated, just for a second. What do you mean? I mean, is there anything else about him that made you choose him specifically? Another pause. No, just the health profile. I nodded slowly. So it has nothing to do with the fact that it's Ryan Matthews? The color drained from her face. What? I saw the emails, Emma. I talked to Ryan. I know everything. She started crying then. Those big dramatic tears that used to make me want to fix whatever was wrong. Now they just made me angry. It's not what you think, she sobbed. Really? Because I think you deliberately chose your ex-boyfriend's sperm, had your friend Olivia bypass clinic protocols, lied to me for months, and planned to let me raise another man's child without ever telling me the truth? Is that not what happened? She kept crying and saying how sorry she was, how she never meant to hurt me, how we could still be a family. I turned off the recording. I had what I needed. I'm filing for divorce, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I've already moved most of my stuff out. You can keep the furniture, but the house is in my name and I'll be selling it. You can't do that, she said, suddenly looking panicked. I'm pregnant. Where am I supposed to go? That sounds like a problem for you and Ryan to figure out. He doesn't want anything to do with the baby, she practically screamed. He just donated sperm. He's not ready to be a father. I almost laughed. Well, neither am I. At least not to this kid. Thor chose that moment to meow loudly from his carrier by the door. I'd brought him to get the rest of his things. She yelled while crying, Jack, please. I know I messed up badly, but I love you. We can work through this. I turned to look at her. Really look at her. Maybe for the last time as her husband. No, Emma. You don't love me. You love what I provide. Stability, a home, a father for your baby. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. I picked up Thor's carrier and headed for the door. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce proceedings, I said, not looking back. Don't call me anymore. As I walked to my car, I felt a weird mix of emotions. Anger, obviously. Hurt, definitely. But also relief. Like I'd finally cut loose an anchor that had been dragging me down. Thor meowed again from his carrier. I know, buddy, I told him. Let's go home. Our real home. That night, I sent the recording to Vanessa. She texted back almost immediately. Perfect. She admitted enough. We move forward tomorrow. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal meetings, paperwork, and planning. Vanessa filed the divorce papers and a motion to legally establish that I wasn't the father of Emma's baby. Meanwhile, Emma was blowing up my phone with messages ranging from desperate apologies to angry accusations. You're abandoning me when I need you most, and I can't believe you're being so cruel. And my personal favorite, it's still your baby in every way that matters. I blocked her number after that one. Mark and Jen let me stay with them while I looked for a new place. I found a decent apartment that allowed cats and wasn't too far from work. The hardest part was dealing with friends and family who didn't know the whole story. Emma had apparently been telling people I'd had some kind of mental breakdown and abandoned her during her pregnancy. Some people actually believed her, which showed me who my real friends were. My parents were solidly on my side once I explained what happened. My mom cried when I told her she wouldn't be getting the grandchild we'd all been expecting. My dad just put his hand on my shoulder and said, "You're doing the right thing, son." When the court date finally came, Vanessa presented the emails, the texts, the recorded conversation, the testimony from the clinic about protocol violations. She even had Ryan's statement confirming Emma had misled him about my knowledge and consent. Every time Emma's lawyer tried to paint me as the villain for abandoning my pregnant wife, the judge would just look at the evidence folder and raise an eyebrow. And every time Emma's lawyer tried to interrupt, but the judge held up her hand. I've seen a lot in this courtroom, but the level of deception here is extraordinary. The final judgment came down exactly as Vanessa had predicted. The divorce was granted. I wasn't legally responsible for the child, and Emma got nothing from our shared assets since the fraud was so clearly documented. Given the evidence of fraud, Mr. Wilson's assets remain his sole property. Mrs. Wilson will not receive any financial compensation from this divorce, the judge said. Additionally, given that Mr. Wilson is not the biological father, the court recognizes his right to revoke any paternal claims to the child. He will not be financially obligated for child support. Emma's lawyer made one last attempt, asking for consideration due to her vulnerable state as an expectant mother. The judge shut that down immediately. Mrs. Wilson willingly deceived her husband, knowingly altered medical procedures without his consent, and falsified financial statements. There will be no additional compensation awarded. One tap of the gavel. Case closed. Emma just sat there, frozen. Her lawyer closed his briefcase without a word. I stood, buttoned my suit jacket, and walked out without looking back. Outside the courthouse, I took the deepest breath I'd had in months. It was finally over. That was 6 months ago now. I'm still in my apartment, though I'm thinking about buying a small house with a yard where Thor can watch birds. He's doing great, by the way, currently sleeping on the keyboard as I try to type this. I deleted all my social media for a while, just to avoid the drama. When I came back online, I found out Emma had moved back to her hometown to live with her parents. The baby was born last month. A boy, according to mutual friends who still talk to her. I try not to think about it. Looking back, I'm still amazed at how quickly someone I thought I knew completely could turn into a stranger. The Emma I married, and the Emma who did this to me. They can't be the same person, right? But they are, and I just didn't see it until it was almost too late. If there's any lesson here, I guess it's that you never really know someone. Even after years together, people can surprise you in the worst ways. But also, you're stronger than you think. 6 months ago, I thought my life was over. Now, I'm doing okay. Not great, not terrible, just okay. And sometimes, okay is enough. Final update. Hey Reddit, it's Jack again. Wasn't planning on updating, but some crazy shit went down last weekend that I need to share. I'm chilling at home watching the game with Thor when someone starts pounding on my door. I open it to find Emma standing there with her parents and her brother Mike, and she's holding the baby. They push their way into my house before I can stop them. Emma's mom immediately starts with, "It's time you took responsibility for your son." I'm like, "My son? We both know that's not my kid." There was a whole court case about this, remember? DNA evidence? Ryan Matthews? Your ex-boyfriend whose sperm you used? Mike gets in my face and says, "Ryan skipped town 3 months ago. Completely ghosted Emma. Quit his job. Deleted social media. He's not paying any child support." "That sucks for her," I say, "but it has nothing to do with me." Emma starts crying, bouncing the fussy baby. "I made a mistake, Jack. A horrible mistake." Her dad jumps in with some BS about how in the eyes of God, the kid is still my responsibility because we were married when he was conceived. Emma actually has the nerve to say, "Look at him, Jack. He could be yours." We don't really know for sure. We do know for sure. There was a paternity test. It was in your court documents. Her mom, those tests can be wrong. Look at his eyes. They're just like yours. The audacity of these people trying to gaslight me is unreal. I told them to leave, and Mike shoved me, saying, "You're just going to abandon your wife and child? She's not my wife, and that's not my child. And if you touch me again, I'm calling the cops." Emma, full on sobbing. "Please, Jack. I can't do this alone. My parents are helping, but I had to quit my job. We're barely making ends meet." For a split second, I almost feel bad. Almost. Then I remember the months of lying and deception. Mike tries to step toward me again, but his dad holds him back. "You'll regret this," Mike says. "We know where you work. We know your parents' address." That's when I pull out my phone and start recording. "Are you threatening me? Should I call the police now, or would you like to leave peacefully?" They finally left, with Emma's dad turning back to say, "This isn't what a real man would do." I just shake my head. A real man doesn't let himself be manipulated. The next day, Emma's family contacted Vanessa, trying to reopen the case. She shut it down immediately, reminding them about the conclusive paternity test. I also installed security cameras around my house and documented the confrontation in case they try something else. Mike's threat about knowing where I work was especially concerning, so I gave my boss a heads up about the situation. Thor's been extra clingy since that day. I've never been more thankful for this cat. Edit. Thanks for the support. Yes, I filed a police report about the threats. No, I don't feel bad for Emma. I feel bad for the kid. But feeling bad doesn't mean I'm responsible. Story 6. My wife's sister coached her to threaten me with divorce to make me a better husband. Their plan backfired when I hired a lawyer and filed the papers myself. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Sup, Reddit. My wife took some advice from her sister and decided she's entitled to everything I've built. Then she tried to back me into a corner by threatening divorce unless I signed it all over. Instead, I filed the papers myself, and they both lost their shit. Here's what went down. I, 35 male, have been married to Riley, 34 female, for 5 years. And up until about 8 months ago, I thought we had a solid thing going. I'm an owner-operator truck driver with my own rig, been doing long haul for 12 years now. The money's good when you work smart. I clear about $180,000 a year and own our house outright. Bought it cash after a few excellent years on the road. My setup isn't bad either. Got a 2019 Freightliner Cascadia with a 13-speed manual transmission and enough chrome to blind passing aircraft. The thing's paid off and runs like a Swiss watch when you maintain it properly. I've got regular contracts with 3 different freight companies, so work stays consistent. The truck's my office, my income source, and honestly, my pride and joy. Riley's older sister Celeste is a piece of work. She's twice divorced, constantly broke despite getting decent alimony from both ex-husbands, and has this attitude like the world owes her something. She's one of those women who thinks every man is trying to screw her over, while simultaneously expecting them to pay for everything. Basically, she's got the financial planning skills of a lottery winner and the personality of a parking ticket. Celeste started hanging around our place more often about a year ago after her second divorce finalized. At first, Riley would roll her eyes at Celeste's bitter rants about men and marriage. Riley understood my work. The long hours, the weeks on the road, the fact that good money requires sacrifice. She'd never complained about me being gone for stretches or working holidays when the rates were premium. She used to be proud of what I did. She'd brag to her friends about how I owned my own business and made good money without needing a college degree. When I'd come home after a profitable week, she'd be genuinely excited about the money, and we'd talk about our plans for the future. She understood that trucking meant irregular schedules, but steady income if you worked smart. But slowly, I started noticing changes in how Riley talked and acted. It began with little comments about money. She started questioning why I kept my trucking business finances separate from our personal accounts. I'd explained this a dozen times. It's basic business sense to keep fuel costs, maintenance, and taxes separate. But suddenly, she's acting like I'm hiding something from her. The questions got more frequent and more pointed. She'd ask about my gross income versus what I brought home, not understanding that fuel costs alone can eat up 30% of revenue on a bad week. When I tried explaining the economics of owner-operator trucking, fuel surcharges, deadhead miles, maintenance reserves, her eyes would glaze over like I was speaking foreign language. Then she started making snide remarks about the house being technically in my name only. We discussed this when we bought it. I put down the cash from years of saving every penny on the road, took the deed, but considered it ours. It never bothered her before Celeste started filling her head with nonsense about financial security and protecting herself. Riley began adopting Celeste's entitled attitude about money. She'd make comments about how I should be investing in her future more, and started hinting that I should add her name to my truck title and business accounts. When I explained that adding a spouse to commercial vehicle ownership creates unnecessary complications and potential liability issues, she got defensive and accused me of not trusting her. The worst part was watching her personality change. She went from being the easygoing woman who understood the trucker lifestyle to someone who questioned every decision I made and acted like I owed her explanations for how I ran my own operation. Celeste was clearly feeding her ideas about what she deserved as my wife. My dad noticed the change during Sunday dinners. After one particularly awkward meal where Riley made several passive-aggressive comments about men who don't appreciate their wives, Dad pulled me aside. "Son, your wife's starting to sound like her bitter sister. That woman's poison, and it's spreading." I tried talking to Riley about Celeste's influence, but she got immediately defensive. Said I was trying to control who she spent time with, and that I was just threatened by strong women who know their worth. That phrase alone told me exactly where this attitude was coming from. I told Riley that Celeste knowing her worth was like a broke person knowing the price of a Lamborghini. Technically accurate, but completely irrelevant. The real turning point came about 6 months ago, when Riley started complaining about my work schedule. This was completely new. For 4.5 years of marriage, she'd understood that trucking meant long hours and time away from home. She knew I worked hard to maintain our lifestyle and had always been supportive of the sacrifices required. She used to understand that the best-paying loads often meant being away from home for extended periods. Cross-country hauls paid premium rates because most drivers didn't want to be away from their families for a week at a time. I specialized in these longer runs because they were more profitable and let me maintain steady relationships with shippers who valued reliability. She never complained because she knew these runs were funding our comfortable lifestyle. She'd pack coolers with food to save money on truck stop meals and track weather conditions along my route. But after a few months of Celeste being around, suddenly my work ethic became a problem. I came home after a particularly good week, 3 cross-country runs that netted almost $8,000, and instead of being happy about the money, Riley laid into me about being married to my truck instead of her. "You choose that damn truck over everything else," she said, her voice getting sharper. "When's the last time we went out to dinner? When's the last time you were home for more than 2 days straight? Riley, this is how we afford the life you want. Those runs pay for your car, this house, everything we have. Celeste's right. You use work as an excuse to avoid real commitment." She accused me of choosing work over family and said I was using long hauls as an excuse to avoid spending time with her. This was rich coming from someone who'd never complained when those same long hauls paid for her car, her shopping trips, and the comfortable life she'd become accustomed to. The argument escalated when she demanded I start turning down high-paying runs to spend more time at home. I tried explaining that owner-operators don't get paid vacation days. If the truck isn't moving, we're not making money. The truck payment doesn't stop, insurance doesn't pause, and maintenance costs accumulate whether you're working or not. She didn't want to hear about the business realities. She started comparing me to her friends' husbands who worked normal 9-to-5 jobs and were home every evening. Never mind that most of those guys made half what I earned and were constantly stressed about job security and corporate politics. "Why can't you just get a normal job like everyone else?" she demanded. "Celeste says successful men make time for their families. Because normal jobs don't pay for the lifestyle you've gotten used to," I shot back. But Riley, clearly parroting Celeste's coaching, said I was prioritizing money over our relationship. She started keeping track of how many days I was gone per month, like she was building evidence for a case. Around this time, I started noticing she was changing her appearance too. She'd always been a jeans and t-shirt kind of woman, comfortable and practical. But suddenly she started dressing more like Celeste. Tight skirts, low-cut tops, expensive jewelry that I didn't remember buying her. Her hair went from natural brown to blonde highlights, and she started wearing heavy makeup even when just hanging around the house. The transformation was weird and unsettling. It was like watching my wife turn into Celeste's clone. She'd spend hours getting ready to go nowhere, then complain that I didn't notice or appreciate her efforts. When I pointed out that she looked different, she got defensive. Celeste helped me realize I was letting myself go. The irony was that I'd always liked how she looked before. The natural, unpretentious style suited her personality. or at least what her personality used to be. Now she looked like she was trying too hard to be someone else. The situation got even worse when Celeste started making herself comfortable in our house like she owned the place. One Sunday, I came home from a 3-day run to find Celeste sprawled across my recliner, feet up on my coffee table, ordering Riley around like she was the hired help. "Riley, get me another coffee. And turn up the heat. It's freezing in here." When I walked in, Celeste didn't even acknowledge me, just kept barking orders at my wife in my own living room. I asked Riley if she could talk to Celeste about basic respect and courtesy when she's in our house. Celeste overheard and immediately got defensive. "Excuse me? This is my sister's house too, and I'll relax however I want. Maybe if you were home more often instead of playing with your truck, you'd understand how family works." The audacity was staggering. I told Celeste that regardless of how often I was home, she was a guest in my house and needed to show some basic respect. That's when she really let loose. "Don't you dare tell me how to act. Riley deserves better than being married to some control freak who's never around." After Celeste left, Riley completely turned on me, started lecturing me about how I'd embarrassed her sister and made Celeste feel unwelcome. When I pointed out that Celeste had been incredibly rude and disrespectful, Riley acted like I was making the whole thing up. "She wasn't being rude. She was just comfortable. You're being sensitive because you can't handle a woman who speaks her mind." I reminded her that it wasn't Celeste's house. It was mine, that I'd bought with my money before we were even married. Her response was pure gaslighting. "So now you're pulling the my house card? That's exactly what Celeste said you'd do when you felt threatened." The fact that she was quoting Celeste's predictions about my behavior showed how completely her sister had gotten into her head. She defended every bit of Celeste's entitled behavior and made me feel like I was crazy for expecting basic respect in my own home. My dad's comments during this period were golden. After Riley snapped at me for taking a lucrative Seattle to Miami run, Dad quietly said, "Boy, your wife's complaining about the golden goose working too hard. Pretty soon she'll want you to clip its wings and wonder why there's no more eggs." About 4 months ago, things reached a breaking point. Riley came home from one of her sessions with Celeste and announced that she deserved access to all my trucking accounts and business records because that's what real partnerships look like. The demand came out of nowhere during dinner. I was eating a burger and catching up on the day when Riley suddenly launched into this prepared speech about financial transparency and shared responsibilities. She'd clearly rehearsed it with Celeste because it hit all the typical talking points about modern marriage and equality. "I need to be on all the accounts," she said, her voice taking on that entitled tone. "How am I supposed to plan our future if you keep me locked out of everything? Riley, these are business accounts with commercial insurance requirements. Adding you could create liability issues. That's just another excuse." Celeste says men always have excuses when they don't want to share control. When I explained that my commercial insurance and DOT requirements made adding a spouse to business accounts complicated, she lost it. Started yapping about how I was treating her like a roommate instead of a wife, and how Celeste was right about men who use marriage for convenience while protecting their own interests. Riley didn't understand the legal complexities of commercial driving. Adding her to business accounts could affect my insurance rates, create liability issues if something went wrong, and complicate tax filings. The Department of Transportation has strict record-keeping requirements, and mixing personal and business finances could trigger audits or regulatory problems. That night, she demanded I add her name to my truck title to prove I was committed to our marriage. When I refused, she threatened to leave me and take what was rightfully hers anyway. "I've put 5 years into this marriage," she said, her voice getting shrill. "I deserve half of everything you've built. You deserve exactly what you contributed, which was nothing toward my trucking business. How can you say that? I supported you emotionally. I kept this house running while you were gone." She wanted ownership of assets she'd contributed nothing toward acquiring. I told her that her contribution to my trucking business was about as significant as a passenger's contribution to flying the plane. Then she started treating our home like her personal space. She'd rearrange my office space where I kept my logbooks and paperwork, throw away my trucking magazines during her decluttering phases, and act like my CB radio and dispatch equipment were eyesores in her house. Celeste had convinced her that everything in her house should be subject to her approval. The financial demands became ridiculous. She wanted access to my fuel cards, demanded I buy her expensive jewelry as an investment, and started talking about how we needed to upgrade our lifestyle to match what she deserved. She'd point to Celeste's alimony payments as proof that men should be financially supporting women at higher levels. Her spending increased dramatically during this period. She'd make expensive purchases without discussion, then justify them as investments in our future or things we need for the house. When I'd question a $500 shopping spree, she'd accuse me of being controlling and not valuing her contributions to our household. My dad's observations were getting more pointed. After Riley made a scene about wanting a new kitchen during a family barbecue, Dad cornered me by the grill. Son, that woman's got dollar signs in her eyes and an attitude that could strip paint. Celeste's turned her into a gold digger with a wedding ring. So I started documenting Riley's behavior and demands. Something told me I needed to keep track of her increasingly unreasonable expectations and the timeline of how her attitude had changed. My gut was telling me this marriage was heading toward disaster. The final straw came when Riley announced she'd been talking to a lawyer about her rights in our marriage. She said Celeste had recommended someone who specialized in protecting wives from financial manipulation. That's when I knew Celeste had moved beyond just poisoning Riley's mind. She was actively encouraging her to treat our marriage as a business transaction. I told Riley that consulting divorce lawyers while married was like shopping for parachutes while the plane was crashing, probably a bad sign about the flight. 3 weeks before I filed for divorce, I overheard a conversation that changed everything. Riley and Celeste were in our living room while I was in the garage working on my truck's maintenance, and they didn't realize the window was cracked open. I'd been replacing brake pads on my truck, routine maintenance that saves money and keeps me familiar with my equipment. The garage window was open because brake cleaner fumes need ventilation, and I could hear voices from the living room clearly. At first, I thought they were just having another one of their typical sessions. Celeste was coaching Riley on how to manipulate me into giving her access to the trucking business accounts. Men like him need to feel like they're in control. So you make him think it's his idea to add you to everything. Cry a little. Talk about trust and partnership. Make him feel guilty for keeping you out. Riley was laughing about how easy I was to manipulate. She said she'd been following Celeste's script about feeling excluded from financial decisions, and that I was starting to crack. The casual tone of their conversation was what really got to me. They weren't discussing relationship problems or communication issues. They were strategizing how to manipulate me into giving up control of assets I'd worked years to build. Riley was laughing about tactics that had been causing me genuine stress and anxiety. The conversation got worse. Celeste was telling Riley to start documenting everything I spent money on: fuel, truck payments, maintenance, so she could use it against me later. Men always hide assets during divorce. You need to be smart and document everything now while you still have access. The casual way they discussed divorce like it was inevitable was chilling. Celeste's expertise came from her own divorce experiences. She knew how to document spending patterns, create evidence of financial misconduct, and build cases for asset division. The woman had turned divorce into a science and was now teaching my wife her methods. Riley mentioned how she'd been building a case for financial abuse by keeping track of every time I questioned her spending or worked long hours. Celeste praised her for being strategic and said most women were too emotional to properly plan their exit from marriage. They were literally plotting against me while living in my house. The financial abuse angle was particularly twisted. Riley was reframing normal budget discussions and work obligations as evidence of controlling behavior. Every time I'd questioned an unnecessary expense, she'd been documenting it as potential ammunition for divorce proceedings. They talked about timeline and strategy. Celeste advised Riley to wait until after my busy season ended, so I'd have more cash in business accounts. She suggested Riley should start taking photos of my truck and expensive items in our house to document marital assets for future division. The timing discussion revealed how calculated their approach was. That conversation lasted almost an hour, and every minute was them strategizing how to manipulate and eventually financially destroy me. Riley wasn't the victim of Celeste's bad influence. She was a willing participant in a plan to con me out of everything I'd worked for. I went inside acting like nothing had happened, but internally, I was planning my own strategy. If they wanted to play games, I was going to make sure I won. Two could play chess, but I was about to flip the board and play checkers instead. The next morning, I called my dad and told him exactly what I'd overheard. His response was immediate. "Son, that snake's been planning to rob you blind. Time to batten down the hatches and protect what's yours." My dad's a retired mechanic who's seen this kind of situation before. He helped me understand exactly what needed to happen to protect my assets from someone planning to use divorce as a payday scheme. We had 3 weeks to get everything secured before Riley could execute whatever timeline Celeste had given her. First priority was my truck and business. My dad and I met with my lawyer to transfer ownership to a family trust with Dad as the trustee. Since I'd bought the truck before marriage, and Riley had never been involved in the business operations or contributed capital, it could be protected as separate property. The lawyer said my timing was perfect. Doing this while still married, but before any divorce proceedings showed it wasn't done to hide assets from the court. The trust structure was elegant in its simplicity. Dad became the legal owner of my trucking business assets, but I retained operational control through management agreements. Riley couldn't claim ownership of assets she'd never contributed to, and the timing proved the transfers weren't done to defraud creditors or hide marital property. Next was the house. Since I'd bought it with cash before marriage, and it was solely in my name, we restructured ownership through the same family trust. My dad became the official owner on paper, with me retaining all rights to live there and manage the property. Riley had no legal claim to it, but this eliminated any argument about marital property. The house transfer was particularly satisfying because it solved Riley's biggest misconception about ownership. She'd been acting like joint tenancy was automatic in marriage, but since I'd purchased with premarital assets and never added her name, she had zero legal standing. The trust just made that reality bulletproof. I slowly moved money from our joint accounts into business accounts, then into the family trust structure. Since Riley had been planning to document my spending anyway, I made sure every transfer was legally justified and properly documented. My dad joked, if she wants to play accountant, let's give her some real numbers to crunch. The money transfers required careful documentation to avoid accusations of asset hiding. Every movement was legitimate. Business funds going to business accounts, premarital savings being protected through proper legal structures. If she wanted to scrutinize my finances, she'd find everything properly documented and legally sound. The truck, trailer, and all my trucking equipment got transferred into the trust structure. My lawyer confirmed that since these were business assets acquired before marriage, Riley had no claim to them. But moving them into the trust created an additional layer of protection. I started keeping detailed records of Riley's spending and behavior. Every unreasonable demand, every entitled outburst, every time she threatened me financially, it all went into a file. My dad said, "Document everything, son." Women like her always think they're smarter than they are. During these weeks, Riley had no idea what was happening. She kept up her act of playing the loving wife, while secretly plotting with Celeste. I played along, acting concerned about her feelings, while systematically protecting everything I'd worked to build. It was like watching someone plan a bank heist, while I was busy moving all the money to a different vault. She'd make subtle comments about our assets and shared financial futures, while I was systematically ensuring she'd have no claim to anything. Her confidence in Celeste's strategy made her careless about operational security. My dad was brutally honest about the situation. Your wife's turned into a parasite, and her sister's the infection. Time to cut out the disease before it kills the host. His military background made him see this situation exactly for what it was, a hostile takeover attempt. By the end of 3 weeks, everything valuable was protected through legal structures Riley couldn't touch. My truck, house, equipment, savings, all of it was secure from her planned cash grab. On a Tuesday morning, I had divorce papers served to Riley at her work. The timing was crucial because Riley would have several hours to absorb the reality before Celeste could swoop in with damage control. Riley came home that evening in a state I'd never seen before. She was holding the divorce papers and shaking, not from sadness, but from pure rage. "What the hell is this?" she screamed, waving the papers at me. "You can't just throw me away like garbage." "It's exactly what it looks like, Riley. We're getting divorced. You can't do this to me. I have rights. I've invested 5 years of my life in this marriage." When she realized I was serious about the divorce, Riley immediately started making demands about the house and truck. "I deserve half of everything. The house, the truck, the business. I helped build all of this." "You helped build exactly nothing, Riley. You never contributed a dime to any of it. That's not how marriage works. Everything you earned while we were married is mine too." When I calmly explained that prenups weren't the only way to protect premarital assets, her entitlement turned into full hysteria. "You manipulative jerk. You planned this. You've been hiding money from me." She started screaming about how I couldn't just throw her away with nothing, and that she had rights as my wife. The mask had completely slipped. This wasn't a woman heartbroken about losing her marriage. This was someone angry about losing access to assets she'd been planning to take. "Celeste told me you'd try something like this," she yelled. "Men like you always screw over their wives when you think you can get away with it. Celeste can tell you whatever she wants. Your lawyer will explain what you're actually entitled to." The screaming fit lasted almost 20 minutes. Riley cycled through anger, threats, tears, and back to anger without any genuine emotion about our relationship ending. It was pure performance designed to manipulate me into giving her what she wanted. You can't take everything and leave me with nothing. That's not fair. I gave you the best years of my life. You gave me 5 years of marriage, Riley. In return, you got 5 years of a comfortable lifestyle you never had to work for. She called Celeste immediately, and within an hour, Celeste was at our house acting like she was Riley's attorney instead of her sister. Celeste started making threats about how I couldn't hide assets and that they knew all about my trucking income. I just smiled and told her my lawyer would be in touch. Celeste's arrival transformed Riley from emotional wreck to strategic adversary. They huddled together reviewing the divorce papers, making notes, and planning their response. Don't worry, Riley, we'll get you what you deserve. Men think they can just discard women when they're done with them. He's trying to steal everything from me, Riley sobbed. How can he be so cruel? The next few days were chaotic. Riley alternated between trying to seduce me into changing my mind and threatening legal action. She seemed genuinely shocked that someone had outmaneuvered her and Celeste's grand plan. Her attempts were pathetic. She'd suddenly become the loving wife again, cooking my favorite meals and acting affectionately, all while making subtle comments about how we could work things out if I was reasonable about the financial arrangements. The manipulation was so obvious it was almost insulting. Celeste showed up with a lawyer she'd consulted, thinking they could intimidate me into a settlement. When they realized the house and truck were protected in a family trust, Celeste started screaming about fraud and hidden assets. You can't do this! You can't just hide everything in a trust to screw over your wife. Good luck proving fraud on assets that were never marital property to begin with. The lawyer consultation revealed how unprepared they were for my counter strategy. Celeste had assumed I'd be reactive and emotional, making desperate moves to hide assets after being served. Instead, they discovered that everything had been legally protected weeks before any divorce proceedings began. Riley tried every manipulation tactic Celeste had taught her. She cried about how I was abandoning her, threatened to destroy my reputation with other truckers, and even tried to claim she'd contributed to building the business by supporting me emotionally. When nothing worked, she resorted to demanding spousal support for life because she'd sacrificed her career for our marriage. The emotional support argument was ridiculous. Riley worked part-time by choice and had never shown interest in advancing her career. She'd actively discouraged me from working longer hours that would have increased our income because it meant time away from home. Now she was claiming sacrifice for decisions that benefited her lifestyle preferences. The lawyer Celeste brought took one look at the asset protection structure and told them they had no case. Everything had been done legally, with proper documentation, and before any divorce proceedings. Riley's face when her own lawyer told her she wasn't entitled to anything was priceless. She looked like someone who'd just discovered their lottery ticket was a fake. Celeste's final threat was calling my family to expose what kind of man I really was. My dad answered the phone and listened to her rant for about 30 seconds before saying, "Lady, you picked the wrong target. Don't call here again." Then he hung up on her. It's been 18 months since the divorce was finalized, and the contrast between my life and Riley's couldn't be more dramatic. I kept the house, the truck, and my peace of mind. Riley got exactly what she contributed to our marriage, her own savings. The divorce proceedings lasted only 4 months because Riley had no legal standing to claim anything. Her lawyer advised her to accept the settlement offer rather than waste money fighting a losing battle. Celeste's grand strategy had backfired spectacularly, leaving Riley worse off than when she started. I'm dating Eleanor now, a woman who runs her own small logistics company and actually understands what it means to work in transportation. When I told her about Riley and Celeste's scheme, her response was, "Sounds like you dodged a missile, not just a bullet. Eleanor's got her own assets and success, so she's with me because she wants to be, not because she needs a meal ticket." Meanwhile, Riley's life completely imploded after our divorce. Without access to my income, she couldn't maintain the lifestyle Celeste had convinced her she deserved. She moved in with Celeste initially, but that living arrangement lasted only 3 months before they had a massive falling out. Riley discovered that Celeste had been using her as much as she'd been using me. Living together revealed Celeste's true character: demanding, entitled, and financially irresponsible. When Riley couldn't contribute enough money to maintain Celeste's lifestyle, their sisterly bond deteriorated rapidly. Turns out Celeste had been borrowing money from Riley during our marriage, promising to pay it back when Riley got her settlement. When the settlement never materialized, Celeste couldn't repay what she owed. The money Celeste had borrowed wasn't small amounts either. She'd been extracting cash from Riley for months, using sob stories about temporary financial difficulties and promising repayment from her anticipated alimony increases. When Riley needed that money back to establish independent living, Celeste suddenly couldn't remember the loans. Riley's had to move back in with her parents and take a full-time job for the first time in years. The adjustment has been brutal for someone who'd gotten used to a comfortable lifestyle funded by someone else's work. She's working retail at a department store, dealing with difficult customers, and earning a fraction of what she was used to having available. Meanwhile, Celeste's situation deteriorated even faster. Her alimony from her second divorce ended last year, and she's been scrambling to find someone new to support her lifestyle. She tried going after a few divorced men in town, but her reputation preceded her. Dad's take on Celeste's dating prospects. That woman's got about as much chance of finding a husband as a fox has of getting invited to guard the henhouse. But the real plot twist came about 6 months ago when my mutual friend Michelle reached out with some interesting information about Celeste. Michelle works at the same company where Celeste briefly tried to get a job, and she'd been hearing stories through the local gossip network. Turns out Celeste had been secretly seeing her second ex-husband Mark throughout the entire period when she was coaching Riley to divorce me. While Celeste was preaching about how all men were trash and marriage was a trap, she was sneaking around having dinner dates and weekend getaways with the very man she'd divorced for financial irresponsibility. Michelle felt obligated to let me know because she thought the hypocrisy was too outrageous to keep quiet. She said Celeste would cancel plans with friends to meet up with Mark, making excuses about work or family obligations while maintaining her public stance about male toxicity and divorce being liberation. The hypocrisy was staggering. Celeste had been coaching Riley to destroy her marriage while simultaneously working to rebuild her own failed relationship. She'd convinced Riley to leave a stable, financially secure marriage while secretly pursuing the very type of reconciliation she preached against. Michelle told me the whole thing came crashing down when Riley discovered Celeste and Mark together at a restaurant. Apparently, Riley was there with a friend when she spotted her sister holding hands with her ex-husband across the dining room. What happened there was nuclear. According to Michelle, Riley lost it completely. Started screaming at Celeste about being a lying hypocrite who destroyed her marriage while secretly crawling back to her own ex-husband. The scene was so loud and dramatic that other diners were recording it on their phones. Restaurant staff had to intervene when Riley started throwing breadsticks at Celeste's table. The meltdown included Riley calling Celeste a pathetic, desperate liar who'd ruined her life out of jealousy and bitterness. She accused Celeste of using her divorce advice as a way to feel better about her own failed relationships while secretly trying to rebuild what she'd thrown away. The humiliation was complete and very public.